Chapter 2983. Shi Yongyan looked at Mo Shikong calmly, but a complicated and disappointed look flashed across her eyes. She originally thought that the man she married was just not decisive in his actions, but now it seemed that he was simply soft-hearted and short-sighted. Ever since they found that disgusting family, King Zheng's residence had been in a lot of trouble. In fact, she really couldn't understand her husband's thoughts. In terms of blood ties, there was a slight connection. Blood ties were the deepest fetters that couldn't be severed from the beginning. But wouldn't it be ridiculous to talk about how deep blood ties were? King Zheng was an orphan since young. He followed Her Majesty the Empress from the age of 3 and was raised by her until he was a little over 10 years old. It could be said that King Zheng spent much more time with Her Majesty than Her Majesty's biological son, Mo Lian. Ever since Her Majesty's accident 17 years ago, the entire Divine Prefecture was in turmoil for a period of time. In recent years, Divine Prefecture finally became peaceful, and their days slowly became better. King Zheng had been thinking about it since a few years ago and began to search for his family. Family? Shi Yongyan couldn't help but snort. It was simply ridiculous. What kind of family was a parent who could abandon you without hesitation when you were fleeing for your life when you were young? Instead of saying that the Su family brought their children to the imperial capital to search for their family, it was better to say that it was King Zheng who sent people to find their family and then brought them over to provide for them. Shi Yongyan really couldn't understand how much affection could there be between these so-called family members who had never lived together since young. However, King Zheng was a stubborn person who was foolishly filial to the extreme. You sent people to deal with my second brother, and now you dare to say such things. Do you really think I'm afraid of your Shi family? Your Highness. Shi Yongyan stood up from the chair and looked at him coldly. Yongyan is doing this for your Highness's sake. That Su Shihua is already in this state, and your Highness still wants to waste manpower, resources, and energy on him? In the end, not only will it be a waste of effort, but it will also drag down our entire residence. What kind of situation does your Highness think our residence is in now? From 3 days ago until now, your Highness, have you calculated how many spirit coins and herbs you have spent on that living corpse? There are so many people in the residence, and the expenses are already high. Your Highness, you also know that ever since you brought second brother and third sister over, the palace's expenses have increased by several times. If it wasn't for this concubine using the dowry stores to supplement the budget, do you think this palace would be able to survive? This is the reason why you sent someone to deal with my second brother. Mo Shikong trembled with anger. In your eyes, is that money more important than my second brother's life? Princess Consort Zheng used the handkerchief in her hand to wipe the corners of her mouth, and a cold smile appeared on her harsh face. The Prince of Zheng raised his hand and was about to slap Princess Consort Zheng's face. Princess Consort Zheng raised her head and looked at him coldly. If Prince continues to let Su Shihua drag things out, the entire prince's estate will be dragged to death sooner or later. I'm just helping His Highness solve a big problem. Could it be that Prince will really listen to father-in-law's words and enter the palace to ask His Majesty for medicinal herbs and pharmacists for the sake of Su Shihua, this living dead? Everything this concubine does is for the sake of your Highness. Your Highness insists on going against the Crown Prince for the sake of the Su family. The gains do not make up for the losses. Chapter 2984. Presumably, your Highness has clearly seen His Highness the Crown Prince's temper after this period of time. Do you really think that you will have a good time after falling out with His Highness? Shi Yongyan clenched her fists tightly and did her best to control the anger that was swirling in the depths of her heart. There had to be a limit to being brainless, right? Mo Shikong furiously glared at the woman in front of him and suddenly recalled the icy words Mo Lian left behind before leaving. Be Prince Zheng properly. Be Prince Zheng properly. Damn it. Mo Shikong felt repulsed, irritated, and gloomy. His identity as Prince Zheng could really be removed at any time, right? Right now, Crown Prince Mo's words were like a sharp sword hanging over his head. It could drop down at any moment and snatch everything away from him, snatch it away. Mo Shikong had difficulty breathing, and his heart was so stifled that it was almost about to explode. He fiercely glared at Shi Yongyan before abruptly flinging his sleeves and turning to leave with large strides. If my parents ask about this matter, you can explain it to them yourself. Princess Consort Zheng was so angry that she plopped down on the wooden armchair. Her chest heaved up and down as she panted heavily. In the end, it was her, the wife, who was in the wrong. Could it be that everything she did was not for the sake of Prince Zheng and Prince Zheng's estate? On Lady Jojo's end, she naturally did not know that after Mo Shikong brought Su Shihua back to the imperial capital, he went through a lot of trouble to find someone to treat him and caused a great commotion in Prince Zheng's estate. Even if she knew, she would probably just purse her lips and say, "It's a waste of effort." As for 7th Yen, this little fellow, although his dragon form was nothing special, his strength absolutely could not be underestimated. The little fellow was still in the late-stage infant stage and had yet to enter the growth stage. If he spat out a mouthful of blazing dragon's breath, he could definitely kill a level 15 great spiritual master. Lady Jojo was completely uninterested in what Prince Zheng's estate was up to. She, Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others were ready to set off early in the morning and arrived at the learning area plaza. Leading a row of white-robed priests, Holy Sun Mi Yen was already standing at the front of the square, on the most eye-catching arena. His white robe fluttered in the wind, and he had a compassionate expression on his face. It was as if he was shrouded in holy light just by standing there. Arbor secretly rolled his eyes, then turned to Prince Mo and whispered, "Did they say when they would depart?" Prince Mo knew that the little fellow was a little impatient, and could not help but secretly hold back his laughter, saying softly, "For this trip, other than the two of us, we will also select 30 people from the academy to go with us. We will probably only depart when everyone is present." Little Fatty, who was known for his information, squeezed his way forward and said, "Hey, I heard that there are more than 30 people from our academy." This time, the Sun Moon Temple was especially generous. Not only did they choose 30 people from our academy, but they also chose 30 people from our academy. It seems like they've even selected some students from other academies. In addition, they seem to have selected some people with special talents from the Divine Land and brought them along. Little Fatty rubbed his chin and muttered, "I suspect that this trip will definitely be dangerous. Is everyone here? Let's start the roll call now. Mu Roxuan. Gui Xuan. Long Min." On the side, the little priestess added with a grin, "Those whose names are called, please walk to the front." Chapter 2985. Zhongli Jiwei. Chen Baojia. The young men and women whose names were called each gracefully flew onto the large stage and stood still, their expressions rather complacent. But that was to be expected. To be able to break through the top 30 rankings in the previous arena competition, not only did they have strength, but luck was also indispensable. The little stoic expressionlessly looked at them. When Nether Leopard's name was announced, everyone was stunned and whispered to each other for a while. Soon after, they saw a person jump up from the back of the crowd like a monkey and rapidly run up the large stage. "Excuse me, excuse me. Thank you, excuse me." Ming Bao ran up the stage with a grin and cupped his hands at Chen Baojia, Zhongli Jiwei, and the others standing next to him. Chen Baojia swept him a glance and deliberately leaned closer to Zhongli Jiwei, muttering softly, "I wonder who he is. Everyone is outside looking for him like a net, but he's actually enjoying the show and doesn't mind it blowing up." Previously, everyone thought that Ming Bao was the same as 5th young Master Qin and was abducted while shopping in the inner city. In the end, reality proved that this guy had gone crazy from playing and forgot to return to the academy. Although the vice president had already harshly reprimanded him, the students who went out to look for him were all very gloomy and dissatisfied. They only felt that this guy was too unreliable and didn't know his limits at all. The students of the Divine Province and Sangzhou kept muttering in their hearts. As expected, an uncivilized place like Ming Province produces all these baffling talents. "His Highness Yasi is coming down," someone called out softly. Everyone's gazes turned to the steps. Arbor and Emolien's group were standing in the front row, so Min Yasi naturally saw them when he passed by. This was Miss Qiao's first time seeing Ming Province's crown prince after returning. Seeing that his complexion was a bit pale, as expected, he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness. The strangest thing was that one of Ming Yasi's arms also seemed to be broken, and it was still tied up in a sling. Ming Yasi's gaze coldly swept over Emolian. Sir Jojo also couldn't resist raising her small head to look at her husband. Earlier, her husband had said that he had left behind a wisp of his divine soul and led a group of hidden guards to cause trouble for Ming Yas. Her husband also said that he would beat Ming Yas up to the point where he wouldn't be able to get out of bed for 2 or 3 days. Looking at it now, it was true. Although Yas could walk normally now, his arm was still broken. Judging from the state he was in 3 days ago, he might be in an even worse state. Jojo silently retracted his gaze and waited for the priestess to call the 30 students onto the stage. Holy Sun Mayan said reluctantly, "Crown Prince of Godly Land and Crown Princess, please come up." The little fellow held her husband's hand and stomped up the arena. She asked impatiently, "When are we leaving?" They were so long-winded and even held a roll call ceremony. The efficiency of the Sun Moon Temple was really bad. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at her with a fake smile. Then he ignored the little girl's question and said in a deep voice, "In this trip to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm, there are dangers as well as opportunities. There are some things that I want to make clear to everyone before we leave. If everyone is willing to go to the Sun Moon Mystic Realm with the temple, please sign an oath first. I guarantee that if there are any dangers on this trip, I will take full responsibility." "Our temple won't take any responsibility," Holy Sun Mi Yen said coldly. Chapter 2986. Sure enough, the Sun Moon Temple was crafty enough. They wanted to be a hands-off shopkeeper and not manage the accounts at all. Because among the people heading to the Sun Moon Secret Realm, there were the Crown Prince of the Divine Province, Prince Chun of the Tsang Province, and the Crown Prince of the Ming Province, as well as many outstanding disciples from large patrician families. It was hard to guarantee that if something happened to these people, the elders of their families wouldn't vent their anger on the temple because of these disciples. The Sun Moon Temple was naturally not that stupid, nor did they want to directly face the wrath of the emperors of the 3 provinces, so they thought of this method in advance. If they signed an oath, then they would naturally bear the full responsibility if something happened to them, and it would have nothing to do with the temple. Zhongli Jiwei's eyes flickered slightly, and then she said faintly, "In that case, even if we encounter danger in the secret realm, the temple won't lend us a helping hand?" Chen Baojia also couldn't help but chuckle. The temple truly has a good plan. Sir Jojo took the oath from the temple's priest and glanced at it before throwing it on the ground with a plop. Holy Sun Mi Yen was infuriated by the little stoic's attitude. Ignoring the priest's tugging, he turned to glare at Jojo. "What, you don't want to enter the secret realm? What kind of bullshit oath is this?" Qi Xianxian grumpily shouted from the side, "What do you mean by life and death in the secret realm, and the temple won't take responsibility if you encounter danger? And those who enter but aren't disciples of the temple can only choose to bring out one secret treasure when they come out of the secret realm. The rest of the treasures must be handed over to the temple." "Bah! You're so shameless." Qi Xianxian rolled her eyes and snorted. "You want to find people to work for your temple again, but you won't give them any benefits. No one is a freaking fool." Holy Sun Mi Yan's face darkened, and he said indifferently, "After entering the secret realm, life and death are naturally up to fate. This time, the temple isn't only bringing in 32 Royal Academy students. In addition, there are also dozens of students from several different academies in the 3 provinces. In addition, we have recruited many talents from Ming Province, the Divine Province, Tsang Province, and even several large tribes outside the 3 provinces to enter the secret realm together. After entering, everyone must temporarily obey orders until we give everyone time to act separately. This is not an oath written specifically for a student of the royal school." Holy Sun Mi Yen says coldly, "Instead, every non-believer of my shrine has to sign such an oath before entering the secret territory. In other words, if you don't want to sign, then don't go." Everyone had spent so much effort and finally obtained a precious spot. How unwilling would they be to give it up now? "Bullshit," the little stoic said indifferently, and everyone's gazes uniformly shifted to her. The little fellow was too lazy to speak, so she tugged at her husband's sleeve. Mo Lien didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she still said, "The two of us are using our spots to exchange for the life of your holy maiden. Don't forget. This oath is not an oath. We will not sign it." Mo Lien said indifferently, "If you don't bring us in, then hand over your holy maiden." Kill her." Arbor nodded his small head and said seriously. Holy Sun Mi Yen was so infuriated by these two that his heart and lungs hurt. Chapter 2987. The rest of the people looked at the divine land crown prince and the crown princess with a strange expression, and they secretly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yan's face. Arbor would be stupid to sign that oath. It was clearly written in the oath that she had to hand over all her treasures, and only one could be kept. But how could she hand over the treasure that was in Sir Jojo's pocket? That was just bullshit. Although she wasn't sure if this oath would have any binding effect on her galaxy. Why would she take the risk? She and her lotus were the two places that the people of the Divine Hall used to buy the lives of the holy nun. She had to figure out what a bunch of muddle-headed guys were thinking. Holy Sun Mi Yen glared at Arbor angrily. After a while, he squeezed out a few words from between his teeth. "Isn't the matter of the holy nun already over?" Little Crown Princess turned hostile and stared coldly at Holy Sun Mi Yen, saying, "I don't want to turn the page now. What can you do to me?" What a load of nonsense. "Shut up." Arbor roared at him impatiently, and then shouted into the air, "Where are the guards of the Crown Princess?" Everyone twitched the corners of their mouths inexplicably. Bam, 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 bam. Several figures immediately flew out from their hiding places and stood in a row behind Little Crown Princess. "Go and return the mining rights contract of Chess Mountain Spiritual Mine to the Divine Hall. By the way, capture that Yaoguang holy nun for me, the Crown Princess. I, the Crown Princess, want her to die right now." Qi Xianxian, Duanmu Qing, and the others expressed their helplessness at the same time. Their Lord Xiao Qiao was truly a strange little fellow. She could really turn hostile without any hesitation, and didn't care about Holy Sun Mi Yan's old face at all. Holy Sun Mi Yan only felt that the anger in his chest was about to erupt like a volcano. He looked around and saw that the other 30 people on the stage didn't say anything. Instead, they were all looking at him as if they were watching a show. It seemed that regardless of whether or not any of them had any grudges with the little Crown Princess, everyone's thoughts were the same at this moment. They were all standing by the side of the little Crown Princess who had turned hostile. Holy Sun Mi Yen took a deep breath. "Call them back." Seeing that those one-track-minded hidden guards were really going to capture Yao Guang Saintus, Holy Sun Mi Yen was so furious that his lungs were about to explode. His mouth trembled as he couldn't help but roar. "What? The two of you are under special circumstances, so you don't have to sign it. However, the others, oath." Xiao Mu hollered at the flabbergasted young priest. The priest's hand trembled, and he quickly handed a new oath to Arbor. The little stoic expressionlessly skimmed through it again. Then, she took out a cinnabar brush from her inner world and circled a few words on that oath before making a cross. "You can be responsible for your own life and death, but the others must move together with you and listen to your commands. There's no need for bullshit like that. After entering the secret realm, each of you will act separately. If you can, then you can. If you can't, then go and capture that Yaoguang Saintus. What are you waiting for? Enough." Holy Sun Mi Yen tore off that refined and noble appearance of his and roared furiously, "If you want to act separately, then so be it. Do you think that the temple has to go with you? You can only take one treasure from the secret realm. This condition absolutely couldn't be reduced." End of the 6th watch. Chapter 2988. Arbor pursed her small lips and looked at the red-faced Holy Sun Mi Yen. She humphed and said, "Ridiculous." She had to argue with Sir Jojo until her face turned red. It was truly too boring. Sir Jojo originally didn't want to insult her, but she had to come to her and beg to be insulted. Holy Sun Mi Yan's chest felt stifled, and he didn't want to continue looking at the little stoic. After everyone successfully signed that oath, Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't resist looking at Arbor and Emolian. The more he looked, the more he found them pleasing to the eye. These two people didn't sign an oath, so they naturally weren't bound by the laws of heaven and earth. If they found more than one treasure in the secret realm, wouldn't that be letting these two people off easy papa? Holy Sun Mi Yen immediately tossed this thought to the back of his mind. How could they have such great luck? It was already pretty good to be able to find one or two treasures in a secret realm filled with traps. Although these two people's cultivations weren't bad, there was no guarantee that they wouldn't be abused by the secret realm's traps, formations, and spirit beasts. Humph. Holy Sun Mi Yen held his head high and plastered that holy and haughty mask on again. He said gravely to everyone, "Since no one has any objections, then let's prepare to set off. Our first stop is the Great North-facing Forest's Northern Transportation Formation." Holy Sun Mi Yen took out a large air transportation spiritual tool and summoned everyone onto it. This air transportation spiritual tool's appearance was a bit like a scabbard and could accommodate about 40 people. There were 32 students in the academy, plus the Holy Sun Mi Yen and a few priests. There were 39 people in total. Therefore, it was quite crowded inside. Sir Jojo expressionlessly sat in the innermost corner with her hands on her knees. She sat obediently next to her husband in a very upright sitting posture. When the air transportation spiritual tool started, it jolted slightly. Zhongli Jiwei's gaze swept over and saw His Highness the Crown Prince instantly reach out to support the little Crown Princess' soft waist. It was so sore that a mouthful of sour water was stuck in her chest, unable to move up or down. Damn it! Did this couple have to be so lovey-dovey? The little Crown Princess was sitting upright. Could it be that she would fall from the air transportation spiritual tool's jolt? The Crown Prince's attention was always on that woman. She was so angry that her chest hurt. Arbor felt a strong gaze directed at her. She raised her head in displeasure and looked at Zhongli Jiwei with a frosty gaze. The corners of the little fellow's mouth curled up into a cold smile. Zhongli Jiwei felt a chill in her face, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. Chen Baojia, who was sitting next to Zhongli Jiwei, hurriedly gave Arbor a very stiff smile and then pulled Zhongli Jiwei's sleeve. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool sat there with different thoughts in their minds. Some of them secretly looked at Arbor and Emol Yen, while others looked at each other and whispered to each other. In any case, the students had successfully set off on their journey. Before they left, Principal Yun looked at them kindly and reminded them kindly, "Everyone must remember that you only have one life. Treasures were indeed good, but life was even more precious. Don't put yourself in danger because of some worldly possessions." Sir Jojo sat for about 5 minutes, then took out an orange from his inner world and pulled his husband's sleeve. Emol Yen couldn't help but smile. She reached out to take the orange and peeled it with a smile. The little guy was, in fact, a foodie. Chapter 2989. Even though she had never admitted this point. But reality proved that as long as the little fellow was idle and had nothing to do, she would always be holding snacks or fruits in her hands. What did she like to eat when reading books? What did she like to eat when watching competitions? Even when she was training, she never forgot to eat after coming out of closed-door cultivation. The first thing she did was expressionlessly look for food. Emol Yen snickered inwardly. After perfectly peeling an orange, she handed it to Sir Jojo. Sir Jojo accepted it expressionlessly. Qi Xianxian, who was sitting on the other side of her, silently twitched her mouth. Jojo, this little foodie, was seriously a bit adorable with her stoic expression. Sir Jojo glanced at Qi Xuanxuan's odd expression from the corner of his eye and took out another orange from his inner world and handed it to her. The two of them started eating in the last row. After finishing the orange, they switched to a banana. After finishing the banana, they took out some dried fruit and started nibbling on it. Then they took turns eating pastries and candies. In the end, they even started munching on melon seeds. Duan Yu, Duan Muqing, and the others, who were sitting in front of them, all twitched their mouths as they secretly suppressed their laughter. These two girls, they were completely treating this as an outing. Holy Sun Mi Yen finally couldn't take it anymore and said, "Set the table." Those two words were sonorous and forceful, almost causing people to choke with laughter. Although Lord Holy Sun's cultivation had reached the spiritual venerable realm, he was used to eating 2 meals a day. So in essence, Lord Holy Sun was also a bit of a foodie. If he wasn't in closed-door cultivation, he would eat every day. Because it was a bit crowded with 39 people, it was completely impossible to set up a small table from the side. Hence, the white-robed priests sat around Lord Holy Sun, each of them holding a bowl of food and handing a bowl of rice to Lord Holy Sun. They silently watched Lord Holy Sun eat gracefully and unhurriedly like this. Sir Jojo glanced at him and silently took back the pile of snacks. He took out his all-purpose food box from his inner world and took out a large pot of fresh fish soup. He also took out 3 to 4 plates of stir-fry and had Duan Yu, the little fatty, and Duan Muqing turn around to carry them for him. Jojo Sama started eating expressionlessly. Qi Xuanxuan's mouth twitched. She stuffed a mouthful of rice into her mouth and almost burst out laughing. The little fatty hurriedly reached out to cover her mouth and cried out, Don't spit, we still have to continue eating later." Mo Lian was so amused by the little guy that she was about to cramp up. This little stoic had always been expressionless, but inexplicably, her entire body was brimming with comedic talent, making people want to smile knowingly. Holy Sun Mi Yen chewed the food in his mouth without tasting it. He only felt that his nose was filled with the aroma of the fish soup and all kinds of stir-fried food. He lowered his head and looked at the rice, steamed buns, and a plate of cold frozen duck meat in his bowl. That plate of frozen duck meat was old and dry. He instinctively wanted to throw it away. Gotcha! Holy Sun Mayan was so angry that he broke the chopsticks in his hand. Seated behind the saint, eldest young Master Qin couldn't help but rub his forehead. Why the hell did he have the urge to burst out laughing? How many spirit coins? Holy Sun Mi Yen suddenly spoke. He just couldn't understand. They both came out for training, so how could that neurotic little stoic still take out warm food? Chapter 2990. Just how freaking much of a foodie are you to be able to store so much food in your inner world? The little priest next to Sir Holy Sun cautiously reminded, Sir, that stoic face often sells at exorbitant prices. Our family really doesn't need to spend so many spirit coins to buy that stoic face's sky-high price dishes. The 2 young masters of the Dou family couldn't help but stifle their laughter. In reality, the 2 of them had wanted to laugh since the beginning, but because they had to take Holy Sun Mi Yan's face into consideration, they endured with great difficulty. At this time, Sir Jojo had already eaten his fill. He took that pot of fish soup from Duan Yu and held it himself. Then, he handed him a clean pair of chopsticks and a bowl of rice, indicating for him to eat. Hearing Sir Holy Sun's inquiry, the little stoic expressionlessly said, 1 pot is 200,000 spirit coins. A small bowl is 20,000 spirit coins. Cough, 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 cough. Before Qi Xianxian could spit out the rice in her mouth, she was hastily stopped by the quick-witted little fatty. Don't spit on Ancestor Xianxian, don't spit. They still had to continue eating, big sister. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was dark and gloomy. He stifled for a long time before saying, Your price is even more expensive than the sky-high holy rice sold at Dragonflame City's Kaidai veranda. Arbor aloofly looked up at him like he was looking at a pauper. You can't afford it, so what are you asking for? It was simply a waste of her saliva. Everyone, the little priest couldn't resist secretly reminding Sir Holy Sun, Sir, actually, we don't have to talk to the little stoic. Was there something wrong with this Holy Sun? Why did he have to tease and talk to the stoic face? Every time, he would be angered to the point of vomiting blood. Wasn't he sick? The Holy Sun coldly ordered after slapping that priest's head, Shut up. Give me a small bowl. The Holy Sun said furiously. Everyone couldn't resist wanting to laugh. The little stoic expressionlessly filled a bowl of fresh fish soup for Sir Holy Sun and had Lu Yu pass it over. The Holy Sun took a sip and immediately sensed the difference. This fish soup felt like it was freshly cooked in a restaurant. He could taste its fresh aroma, and his tongue felt like it was about to melt. Compared to his lukewarm rice, this bowl of fresh fish soup was a little hot. After the saint finished his bowl of fish soup, he turned his face away and stopped talking. Over at Duan Yu's place, They took turns eating lunch in threes before finally stopping. Arbor put away the bowls and chopsticks and let the diligent Chiochio wash them. The saint suddenly asked with a cold face, "Do you have steamed buns for sale?" It turned out that the saint had not eaten his fill. The saint added, "The kind that's piping hot. 500 spirit coins for one bun. You should become a robber, it suits you better." Everyone ridiculed inwardly. Subsequently, they heard eldest young Master Qin say, "Give me 2. When he turned around and saw Qinjio looking at him with a pitiful expression, eldest young Sir Qin choked and hastily said, "Give me 4. 6. Omega Kotoku said calmly. Eldest young Sir Qin silently took out his money pouch and took out 3,000 spirit coins to give to the little stoic in exchange for 6 piping hot meat buns. The stoic face expressionlessly put away the money and took out a pot of spiritual tea from her inner world, pouring a cup for Mo Lien, Duan Yu, and the others. Sir Holy Sun, who was currently chewing on a meat bun, couldn't resist the urge to spit at her. "I bought your steamed buns, so you should also give me a cup of tea." Chapter 2991. Eldest young Sir Qin twitched his mouth. According to his understanding of the little stoic, this Sir Holy Sun was clearly looking for trouble again. 1 cup of spiritual tea is 10,000 spirit coins. 3 cups. Eldest young Sir Qin decisively paid again, attracting the gazes of the Gu family's Gu Yishuan and the others like they were looking at an idiot. For people in their cultivation realms, what could they do if they didn't eat or drink for several days and nights? Did they have to buy the exorbitant price of the stoic face's tea and rice here? The eldest young Sir blinked and said with a grin, "I just love to see the little stoic's mischievous appearance when she scams people." Everyone, based on his understanding of the little stoic, although she didn't have much of an expression right now, she should still be quite happy on the inside. She was happy. It was worth it to spend some money to make the stoic face happy. Young Sir Omega Kotoku silently accepted a cup of spiritual tea. After taking a sip, he was slightly startled. Sir Holy Sun angrily flung 20,000 spirit coins at the little stoic. 2 cups. His liver was on fire, and 1 cup was simply not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Gu Yishuan looked at these people as if they were lunatics. Sir Holy Sun definitely had a serious problem. Say, he didn't get along with the little stoic, but he just had to stick close to her and look for trouble. Say, they had similar temperaments, but every time he was angered by this stoic face, the veins on his forehead would bulge. They didn't look like friends at all. 10 cups. At this time, another person spoke up. Everyone turned to look and saw that the one who spoke was Ming Province's crown prince, Ming Yasi. Akir twisted the handkerchief in her hand with a slightly distorted expression. She looked like she couldn't sit still and kept glaring at Jojo. In reality, most of the people who originally forked out money to buy the spiritual tea did so in order to make the little stoic happy. Unexpectedly, they immediately felt something was wrong after taking a sip. This really wasn't some ordinary tea. It really was spiritual tea. After Sir Holy Sun finished drinking a cup, he actually muttered to himself, "There's a reason why it's expensive." This spiritual tea was simply worlds apart from the ones he had eaten in the past. Sir Holy Sun couldn't resist looking back at the little stoic. At this time, the little girl was completely silent. She leaned against the last row and flipped through the yellowed ancient book in her hand, reading page by page. Qi Xianxian was currently wiping her purple light-treasured sword and caressing it lovingly. 2 days ago, Prince Mo returned the newly forged weapons to Qi Xianxian, Duan Muqing, and the others. Everyone's hearts were filled with amazement. In such a short period of time, the Crown Prince was able to refine all 7 weapons to such perfection. Duan Muqing's Emerald Misty Sword was actually refined into a level 15 divine weapon by Prince Mo. It was simply breathtaking. As for the weapons in Qi Xuanxuan's and the others' hands, they had all been refined to the next level. This time, they were all grade 10 god artifacts and above. Mu Roxuan's face darkened as she sat silently in the corner. Ever since she returned to the academy 2 days ago, she had maintained this state of silence. She didn't want to talk to anyone, and she didn't have the slightest interest in talking to anyone. At this time, Looking at Ming Yasi, who was sitting 2 seats in front of her, her gaze flickered unexpectedly, and her heart was filled with displeasure. When she recalled her mother Mu Qingya's reminder, she felt a burst of irritation for no reason. She didn't have any feelings for Ming Yasi at all. She wouldn't leave her future fate in the hands of a strange man like this. While the little stoic was busy eating, Mu Rochuan merely watched coldly from the sidelines. Chapter 2992. Now that she had calmed down, he couldn't resist glancing at her. For some reason, he didn't feel anything when he saw this stoic face in the past, but recently, the more he looked at her, the more vexed he felt. He felt that this girl was very pretentious no matter what she did, as if she was a source of light. Just sitting there and quietly reading a book always attracted people's attention. Bam! All of a sudden, a huge force slammed into their flying spirit tools, causing them to jolt slightly and dive forward. The little stoic, who was holding the book in her hand, was caught off guard and almost rolled out. Emolian was quick to react and quickly reached out to grab his wife, pulling her back to sit next to him. Meanwhile, Duan Yu, who was sitting in front of the little stoic, had already turned around and reached out to support her. The little stoic sat upright and still with a taut face, pulling back Qi Xianxian, who almost rushed out, with her small face taut. Qi Xianxian cursed under her breath and raised her hand to rub her chest. On the other side, Zhongli Jiwei and Chen Baojia weren't so wonderful. They were knocked a few steps forward by this sudden force and crashed into the people sitting in the front row. Zhongli Jiwei was fine, but when she crashed into Dark Yasi, she was forcefully pushed back by the shrieking Akir and glared at several times. Chen Baojia was even more unlucky. She flew into the stocky Ba Shu's back and was pulled into his embrace by the laughing boorish man. Ba Shu's bearded face magnified infinitely in front of her eyes. Chen Baojia even felt that man's large palm pinching the soft parts of her body. Chen Baojia shrieked and raised her hand to slap Ba Shu's face without thinking. A level 9 spiritual cultivator like Chen Baojia's slap was no different from scratching an itch to the level 12 great spiritual cultivator Ba Shu. Ba Shu grabbed her hand and used his arm to clamp her slender waist. He teased, "Little sister Baojia, you were the one who threw yourself at me. Why are you hitting me?" At this moment, something was ramming into their air transportation spiritual tool with great force. Everyone on the air transportation spiritual tool was caught off guard and knocked around. Who would have the time to care about Ba Shu and Chen Baojia? Taking advantage of the turbulence of the flying spirit artifact, Ba Shu deliberately pushed Chen Baojia to the left corner and pressed his body against Chen Baojia's chest. With a teasing smile on his face, he purposely rubbed his body against Chen Baojia's soft body. Ba Shu's beady eyes were filled with lust as they rubbed against each other fiercely. "Ah!" Chen Baojia's voice trembled as she screamed. Her long hair was disheveled as she looked towards Prince Imo. Her eyes were filled with hope and a plea for help. Who on the crown prince's side would care about her? The few of them were so shaken that they could barely sit still. Duanmu Qing summoned the emerald misty sword and pierced through the flying spirit tool that had opened a small gap. With a chi-la sound, the ear-piercing cry of a large bird came from outside. Holy Sun Mi Yan's face completely darkened. He leaned against the window and took a look. A flock of birds. They're all level 4 or level 5 spirit beasts. Don't be nervous. Stabilize the flying spirit tool first. Don't panic, Holy Sun Mi Yan said. Chapter 2993. His words were directed at the little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool. The little priestess's face was a little pale. She pushed the control panel back and forth, trying to stabilize the flying spiritual tool so that it could continue flying. However, there were countless birds blocking the path ahead of the air transportation spirit artifact. Looking out of the control panel's window, he could only see birds crashing into their air transportation spirit artifact non-stop. He couldn't see the road ahead at all. Prince Imo reached out and carried Lord Jojo onto his lap. Lord Jojo sat there obediently. His black eyes rolled around, and he silently took out a small porcelain bottle from his sleeve. Imo Lian immediately reached out and took it. She waved her hand and opened the left window a little, and the porcelain bottle between her fingers bounced out. The porcelain bottle instantly shattered, and the powder inside floated out. After killing several birds that had rushed in, the window was closed again. The flock of birds outside seemed to have gone crazy. After bumping into the flying spiritual tool a few more times, they suddenly began to kill each other. Outside, dark feathers flew chaotically for a while. Soon, the flock of birds' numbers plummeted because of the infighting. The little priestess, who was controlling the flying spiritual tool, finally saw a little of the road. Her fingers pressed on the control panel a few times, and she hurriedly drove the flying spiritual tool out of the flock of birds in front of them. The air transportation spiritual tool jolted heavily, and Chen Baojia's scream was blocked by a big mouth with a strong smell. Her breath was stuck in her throat, and she could only let out a few muffled screams. Her eyes were filled with horror as she looked at the bearded man who was wantonly touching her body. Chen Baojia was anxious, angry, and hateful. She was angry because no one helped her. She was anxious because her chest felt cold, and the cloth on her body seemed to be getting thinner and thinner. She hated that her cultivation was too low. Her body was tightly bound by the rough man in front of her, and she couldn't break free for a while. In the chaos, she was pressed into a corner by a rude man who was molesting her in front of everyone. Chen Baojia's tears kept rolling in her eyes. She turned her face left and right, trying to avoid the man's mouth. Ba Shu, on the other hand, was aroused by her. He couldn't stop caressing her body. It wasn't until the flock of birds had retreated and the flying spirit artifact had stabilized that Ba Shu finally let go of Chen Baojia's body with a wicked smile. Then he said to her in a low, rough voice, "Next time, don't throw yourself at a man so casually. Not everyone is as polite as I am." Chen Baojia was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She got up and raised her hand to throw it at Ba Shu's face. However, she didn't expect that the air transportation spiritual tool would shake violently again, causing her to stumble and fall into Ba Shu's arms. Ba Shu teased her as he reached out and grabbed her waist, rubbing a certain part of his body against hers. Chen Baojia's tearful little face suddenly stiffened, and her body couldn't help but tremble with anger. Shameless, shameless bastard. She was a pure and unmarried girl, yet she was being teased like this. Now, no one had the time to care about those two people. Holy Sun Mi Yen said with a calm face, "Everyone, pay attention. The air transportation spiritual tool is about to fall. Open the spirit artifact cabin and let everyone down." It seemed that the flock of birds had damaged the air transportation spiritual tool, so everyone had no choice but to fly off the air transportation spiritual tool first. Fortunately, the flock of birds had already been dispersed. Prince Mo hugged Sir Jojo, and the two of them were the first to leave the damaged air transportation spiritual tool. Soon after, Duan Yu, Duan Muqing, and the rest also jumped down. The sixth watch ended. Chapter 2994. Because Chen Baojia was flustered, she stepped on nothing for a moment, and her body swayed and fell down. Ba Shu hurriedly took a few steps forward and pulled Miss Chen into his embrace with his big hands. A gust of wind blew against her face. Embarrassed and angry, Chen Baojia pushed Ba Shu away with all her strength. Unfortunately, her cultivation had been suppressed by Ba Shu. In front of a 12th rank spirit master, she couldn't do anything at all. Therefore, Miss Chen was hugged by Ba Shu and flew down from the air transportation's spiritual tool. The gust of wind in her ears blocked Chen Baojia's curses back into her throat. Zhongli Jiwei was secretly pleased with herself. In fact, she had long noticed that Chen Baojia was being humiliated by Ba Shu. She was just watching from the sidelines. Chen Baojia usually put on a holy and kind face, as if she could talk to anyone and get along well with any young lady in Dragon Flame City. But in fact, she was very good at pretending. Seeing her suffer a few hidden losses today and being molested by Ba Shu's beard, Zhongli Jiwei's heart was filled with a twisted pleasure. She deserved it. She let this woman fight with her for the crown prince position. She thought she was so great just because she was the prime minister's daughter. Let's see if she still has the face to fight with me for that position in the future. Zhongli Jiwei was secretly pleased. It was as if she could get rid of Chen Baojia and keep the crown prince in her pocket. If Lord Jojo knew, he would spit on her face. She didn't know where her confidence came from. In fact, the crown prince couldn't even remember whether she was round or flat. Zhongli Jiwei, on the other hand, wanted to enter the Eastern Palace and become the most honorable woman in the divine continent. Everyone flew down from the sky. Everyone's cultivation was above the spiritual realm. Naturally, they wouldn't encounter any danger after flying for a while. Below them was the north-facing forest. But because of the air transportation spiritual tool, they had to land in advance. Therefore, they didn't land near the transportation array in the north. When Sir Jojo landed on the ground, he stepped on the little tail of one of the spirit beasts. The little beast was so shocked that it screamed and tried to run away. Unfortunately, its tail was stepped on by Jojo, and it almost lost its tail when it jumped. Then, it immediately rolled on the ground and screamed twice. The moment Qi Xianxian landed, she coincidentally saw Jojo's dumbfounded expression. She couldn't help but laugh. Lady Qiao Qiao expressionlessly raised her little foot and looked at the little spirit beast that was rolling on the ground and throwing a tantrum. What was going on? She definitely didn't mean to step on it. When the little spirit beast realized that its tail had been freed, it hurriedly got up and rolled towards the underbrush. After a short while, it poked its small head out of the underbrush and threw a certain shiny object to Qiao Mu's feet with a wave of its small paw. Then, it squeaked at her again, raised its little tail, turned nimbly into the bushes, and quickly ran away. Mo Lien was speechless. Why did he have the feeling that his little wife was flirting everywhere she stepped on the little beast's tail, and the little beast actually gave her a gift before it left? This was too much. Qiao Mu expressionlessly stretched out her hand and sucked, and that shiny object landed in her palm. It's actually the crystal core of a 10th grade fire spiritual beast. Mo Lien was speechless. Chapter 2995. The little fellow casually picked up a level 10 fire spirit beast's crystal core. This luck simply made everyone's eyes red with envy. What kind of fucking dog's hit luck was this? She casually landed and stepped on a small beast's tail, yet she still received a spirit beast's crystal core as a gift. Did she have to be so outlandish? The Gu family's Gu Yishuan took a deep look at Arbor. He reached out to pick up a waist pouch that had fallen to the ground and stuffed it back into his waist. Wearing a pair of black boots, he strode forward a few steps. Meanwhile, Zhongli Jiwei's deliberately faked cry of surprise came from the other side. Ayabeo, Baojia, how did you do this? Zhongli Jiwei pursed her lips and did her best to suppress the smile on her lips. She deliberately raised her voice and cried out in surprise, attracting everyone's attention. They saw Chen Baojia hiding behind a pine tree with an ashen complexion. She was practically naked. At this moment, she was taking out clothes from her inner world to cover her chest in a panic. She repeatedly screamed, Don't look over, don't look." Everyone was flabbergasted. "You're a level 9 spiritual cultivator. Don't you know how to use your spiritual energy to protect your body and block out the gales when you land from the air transportation spirit tool? How did you end up in such a sorry state with no clothes covering your body? This was too hilarious." Ba Shu smiled vulgarly and took out a black cloak. He walked to Chen Baojia's side with a hypocritical expression and draped it over her. Miss Chen put it on first. Under everyone's gaze, Ba Shu draped the cloak over her shoulders and conveniently pulled her naked body into his embrace. Chen Baojia felt a wave of revulsion in her heart. She was anxious, angry, and embarrassed. She repeatedly pushed Ba Shu's body and shouted angrily, "Let go, let go." If it weren't for this vulgar man taking advantage of the situation to strip her clothes, would she have ended up in such a sorry state? Now, he was still fine and even dared to pretend to be a good person in front of everyone. Chen Baojia wished for nothing more than to slap him. However, this guy had been secretly and vulgarly using his spiritual pressure to lock down her cultivation, making her unable to resist at all. Everyone looked at this unbearably unlucky Miss Chen and couldn't resist turning back to glance at the expressionless little stoic. Everyone cursed in their hearts. This is probably the true portrayal of luck and misfortune. Some people could just casually land on the ground and step on dog shit luck. However, some people were just so unlucky. Even after jumping off an air transportation spiritual tool, they would still end up in a sorry state. Arbor naturally didn't know what everyone was thinking. She silently put away the crystal core that the little beast gave her and walked forward. The group followed behind her noisily for a while. They felt that the road was overgrown with dead branches and broken trees everywhere. It seemed to be quite difficult to walk. Mo Lien's mouth twitched, and she reflexively glanced at Duan Yu beside her. Our dear Duan Yu was immediately tempted. He coughed lightly and said seriously, "Jojo, how about we have Holy Sun Mayan lead the way?" The little fellow paused and looked at them in confusion. "I'm not leading the way." Everyone was at a loss for words. Holy Sun Mayan also reacted at this time and grumpily rebuked Sir Jojo, "You don't know the way and always like to be the first to rush. Why are you leading everyone blindly?" Sir Jojo expressionlessly said, "I didn't ask you to follow. You like to walk blindly, yet you're blaming me, humph." Chapter 2996. Move to the back. Holy Sun Mi Yen angrily swung his sleeves and walked to the front, leading the group towards the transportation array in the north. Since the place where they landed wasn't far from the transportation array, it would only take them less than an hour to walk there. To these spirit realm cultivators, such a small distance was nothing at all. When Holy Sun Mi Yen led the group to the transportation array in the north of the north-facing Great Forest, they saw from afar that many people were already standing near the transportation array. It seemed that the Divine Palace had really spent a lot of money to invite many students from the academy to participate in the training in the secret realm. "Get out of the way, quick, get out of the way, get out of the way." A tiger's roar came from the back of the group, making them jump in fright. Everyone subconsciously scattered in all directions to avoid the roar. Holy Sun Mi Yen narrowed his eyes and immediately saw a white tiger chasing after a young man who was small in stature but abnormally fast. The tiger was running towards them. This young man's legs were so fast that he arrived in front of them in a few turns. Without saying a word, he hid behind Holy Sun Mi Yen and exclaimed, "Oh my God, big brother, save your brother." The white-robed young priest next to Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but shout, "Who's your big brother? Don't randomly claim to be relatives." "Hey little barbarian, why are you running? Didn't we agree to only fight and not run? Why are you scared now?" A slightly familiar delicate reprimand subsequently entered Xiao Mu's ears, causing her to subconsciously blink her eyes. A cyan shadow flew out from behind the tree. Her long hair was braided and thrown behind her head, and a pair of exceptionally bright eyes looked around with vigor. When her line of sight fell on Arbor, the girl's eyes lit up with a whoosh, and then she screamed. "Little junior sister." This little junior sister could be said to be earth-shattering. The moment he called her little junior sister, a group of people came out from behind the trees and rushed over. Some of these people were holding spatulas in their hands, while others were holding half a drumstick. At a glance, they looked like a group of people having a picnic. The guy holding the drumstick immediately threw away the greasy drumstick in his hand. He excitedly wiped his hands on his body and dashed toward Arbor. "Oh my God, it really is our little stoic face. Ah, a stoic face, it's truly a small world. I didn't expect that the junior sister that I've been thinking about for so long would suddenly appear in front of me." Arbor looked at them expressionlessly. He was a little confused and felt that his eyes weren't enough. A large group of people ran over. The long-braided girl running at the front was senior sister Liang Qingqing. The idiot with greasy hands behind him was Wei Nanfeng. Afterward, senior brother Situ, who was full of smiles and resembled a willow in the breeze, quickly walked over. There was also classmate Bailey Shi, who was similarly stoic and expressionless. Yushio, Lightning, Haitang, Dark Flower, Dark Current, and Charming Night, not a single one was missing. Everyone was here. Just as Wei Nanfeng had said before, it was truly a small world. She didn't expect that the friends she hadn't seen in a long time would suddenly reunite here. Doya walked up very excitedly and reached out to hug the little fellow. "Little junior sister, are you all right?" She had truly missed her too much during this period of time. Unfortunately, Icebound City was isolated from the rest of the world, so she never had the chance to come out. Chapter 2997. The little stoic suddenly smiled, her eyes sparkling as she looked at this group of people in front of her. Doya felt as if there were a myriad of flowers before her eyes, and even frost flowers were blooming along with her. She was incredibly delighted. Oh my, her little stoic junior sister was actually smiling so cutely at her. Her heart was about to melt. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess, it's truly great to see you. Ao Yi and his group couldn't help but want to cry. Their recent experiences were simply indescribable, and they felt bitter just thinking about it. Originally, Man wanted to follow the Crown Princess to the 6 prefectures, but an accident happened once they arrived at Shuntian Prefecture. Afterwards, they were forcefully bought and abducted back to Fire Smelting City and Icebound City, so they couldn't train with the Crown Princess for a long time. The days of being cut off from the rest of the world were too unbearable. Yu Xiu and his group silently shed tears. Arbor looked at their bitter faces and couldn't help but want to laugh. His small lips curled up as he cracked a smile. Are you also here to participate in the Sun Moon's Secret Realms training? Only then did everyone realize that the little stoic and the others must have come here for the same purpose as them. Liang Qingqing was instantly overjoyed. Oh my little junior sister, this is truly great. We haven't had fun together for a long time. This time we must go together. Wei Nanfeng couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Do you know how to speak? What fun. It's clearly training. The little fellow nodded happily. What treasure do you want? I'll find it for you. She spoke as if the entire secret realm was already in her pocket. Holy Sun Mi Yen fumed and glared at the little stoic, irritably glaring at her. Then, his face filled with suspicion as his gaze swept over Qi Xianxian, Liang Qingqing and the others. Originally, this stoic face already had a dozen or so allies. If the dozen or so freaking people from Fire Smelting City and Icebound City were added, wouldn't the stoic face's allies reach nearly 30 people? Was this appropriate after entering the secret realm? There were only about 40 people from the Temple of Light that had entered the secret realm. The stoic face's allies could already catch up to their employer, the temple. Holy Sun Mi Yan's handsome face was gloomy as he carefully examined the little stoic and her allies. The more he looked at it, the more his head hurt. The strength of this allied legion did not seem weak. Do you guys like elixirs or spirit artifacts? If only I could find a few divine artifacts. When the little stoic saw that her family's allies had arrived, she also added a few more sentences. But as these words fell into Saint Sun Mi Yan's ears, the more he heard, the more he felt something was wrong. This stoic face was really not reserved at all. It was as if the Sun Moon mystery realm was opened by her family. She acted like she was rich and overbearing. It was as if she could just wave her small hand and let her allies take whatever they wanted. Holy Sun Mi Yen sneered sinisterly. At this time, Crown Prince Imo had also walked up. He nodded at City E and the others and said, "Let's find a quiet place to talk." Crown Prince Lien is right. Wei Nanfeng nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, "Let's not stand here and block the way. Let's go back and continue the barbecue. We can chat while we eat." The group didn't wait for Holy Sun Mi Yen to speak and went around behind the tree in a hubbub. They had originally set up a small camp at the back and were barbecuing when they heard Liang Qingqing's exclamation of "little junior sister," so they all ran over. Now that everyone had returned to that small camp, they all laughed out of anger with a single glance. Broken dreams. Make up for it tomorrow. Chapter 2998. You guys. Liang Qingqing couldn't help but stare blankly at the group of people sitting in front of the grill. They had previously washed and peeled the food and placed it on the grill. Just because they went to see little junior sister, they all ran away. However, they did not expect that when they returned to their original position, there would actually be someone occupying their place and openly enjoying their food. He had never seen or heard of such a thing before. Wei Nanfeng chuckled and said sarcastically, "I've seen shameless people before, but I've never seen such shameless people." I say, brothers, this food doesn't seem to be yours? You can actually eat it with such a clear conscience? There were currently 7 to 8 people sitting in front of the grill. To be specific, they were 7 brawny men and a graceful woman with a red veil over her face. Those 7 brawny men were currently eating the food on the grill without even lifting their heads. However, that woman in red stood up, and her gaze suddenly brightened when it landed on Wei Nanfeng. Yo, this little brother, don't be so angry. Our dear Wei Nanfeng practically ducked behind the little stoic out of reflex looking at the people around him. He really wasn't the only one who reflexively moved like him. The most hilarious was still the little stoic. She also reflexively extended her small hand to block the woman in red and immediately shouted, "What are you doing?" Mo Lien twitched her mouth and lamented in her heart, "Where did this bunch of scoundrels get this bad habit?" They reflexively ducked behind his wife when they encountered a woman who was stirring up trouble. It simply made one's heart stifled. The woman in red was startled, and she sized up the little stoic before saying with a chuckle, "Little sister, you aren't looking for a beating, right? Hurry and move aside, don't obstruct me from chatting with these little brothers." As she spoke, she turned her gaze and saw the Qin family's young masters walking over with Ming Yasi and the others. This woman's eyes clearly brightened, and she walked towards eldest young master Qin with a turn of her feet. The eldest young master immediately dashed to Arbor's side. "Stoic face, save me." "Bah, who wants your life?" The woman in red ridiculed in her heart, and her gaze swept over them. "Oh, you're all together? Who are you?" Arbor sized her up. At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen heard the news and came forward, introducing them to both sides. "They are students of the royal school." Holy Sun Mi Yen turned to Arbor and said, "This is Queen Fu Sha of the Dafeng tribe." The little stoic replied indifferently before glancing at the 7 brawny men who stood up and walked behind Queen Rosa. The 7 of them had the same arrogant expression. Liang Qingqing could not help but frown and said, "Your men ate our food. Compensate me." Queen Fu Sha raised her delicate eyebrows slightly and laughed. "This little sister is right. Since we ate your food, we naturally have to pay for it." As he spoke, he took out a purse from his waist, counted out 1,000 spirit coins, and handed them over with both hands. Liang Qingqing only glanced at her with a faint smile, but didn't reach out to take it. Since Queen Fu Sha is the leader of a tribe, she must have seen the world. The food we put on the grill is worth at least 8,000 spirit coins, if not 10,000. Are you trying to dismiss a beggar? Queen Fu Sha was startled, but then she laughed. "Oh, as it turns out, you encountered a group of people who are selling at a cheap price. Don't think that this queen is afraid of you just because you have more people." Liang Qingqing raised her eyebrows. "What, as the leader of a tribe, are you trying to snatch other people's food and refuse to acknowledge your debt? Little sister, don't say such unpleasant words." Fu Sha giggled and covered her mouth with her hand. "When we just arrived, there wasn't a single person in front of the grill. How can you prove that the food was left behind by you guys?" Liang Qingqing exploded in anger. However, after thinking it over, there really was nothing to prove that they left behind all the meat and poultry on the grill. Qi Xianxian tugged on the little stoic sleeve and asked quietly, "Jojo, are these the friends who waited at the city gate when you first arrived at Shantian Prefecture?" Sir Jojo nodded. Qi Xianxian beamed with joy. Then today is truly an unexpected reunion. At this moment, Liang Qingqing and the others were also curiously sizing up Qi Xianxian and the others. Now wasn't a good time to introduce each other's identities or speak. She was busy negotiating with that whatever queen, so when she heard this, she only smiled at Qi Xianxian and nodded in greeting. Since there's no way to prove it, then who said there's no way to prove it? Arbor said aloofly. Fu Sha's lips turned up slightly. "How do you want to prove it?" Just as she finished asking this, the sound of people falling to the ground came from behind her. When Queen Fu Sha turned around to look, she was a bit stupefied. What was going on? The 7 strong men who were fine just now were all on the ground now. Their heads were tilted, their limbs were twitching, and white foam was even coming out of their mouths. This clearly looked like they had been poisoned. Queen Fu Sha turned around with a swish and glared at Arbor. She shouted harshly, "You poisoned them?" Xiao Mu calmly nodded her small head. "In order to prevent others from secretly eating it, we've smeared poison on our food beforehand." Mo Lien and Duan Yu couldn't help twitching their mouths. Everyone else was instantly speechless. "What kind of freaking taste do you have? How could you be so ruthless to yourself just to prevent others from secretly eating?" Queen Fu Sha's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. "Little miss, do you need to go to this extent?" The little girl nodded in all seriousness. "One antidote pill costs 100,000 spirit coins. 7 pills are a fixed price, so I'll give you a discount of 680,000 spirit coins, no bargaining." Everyone, haha. Liang Qingqing was in a good mood and laughed heartily. My heavens! Their little stoic was seriously too amusing. When she opened her mouth earlier, she only asked for 18,000 spirit coins for food expenses. When it came to the stoic face, the no bargaining price was 680,000 spirit coins. Haha. Looking at Queen Fu Sha's eyes that were spitting fire, everyone could imagine how dark the face under the veil was. Holy Sun Mi Yen was actually in the mood to watch a good show. He also didn't know what was wrong with him. It seemed like he really was in a good mood when he saw the little stoic dissing people. What was going on? It seemed like he was in a strange mood. For example, he was used to being frequently dissed by the stoic face. One day, he suddenly discovered that it was really quite satisfying to sit and watch the situation unfold while smiling as the stoic face dissed others. Holy Sun Mi Yen creased his brows slightly, inexplicably feeling that there might be something wrong with him. Cough cough cough. Mo Lien coughed lightly and said while holding back her laughter, "Jojo, antidote pills are hard to make. Isn't it too cheap to sell them for 100,000 spirit coins per pill?" Chapter 2999. As soon as the little fellow opened her mouth, Queen Fu Sha threw the entire purse into Arbor's arms with a smack, not giving her any leeway to change her words. "There's 680,000 and several thousand inside. Don't bother with the change. Give me the 7 detoxification pills." She finally saw the signs. If she hesitated for half a second, that stoic-faced lady would definitely raise the price. Fu Sha couldn't help but praise herself for being quick-witted. At the same time, she also saw Holy Sun Mi Yen, who was standing to the side, looking at her approvingly with an experienced gaze. Arbor put away the purse and took out the 7 detoxification pills with an expressionless face. These detoxification pills need to be dissolved in water and swallowed. "Give me 7 cups of clear water." Queen Fu Sha gathered 7 cups, bowls, and plates of different shapes and sizes and asked a water spirit to fill them with water. Only then did Arbor put the 7 detoxification pills into the 7 containers. He expressionlessly watched Queen Fu Sha busily feed the pills to his subordinates. About 3 minutes later, the 7 brawny men opened their eyes and woke up at the same time. Queen Fu Sha's expression was somewhat joyful. "Are you all okay?" It was good that they woke up. Her 7 subordinates would be of great use in the future, so they couldn't be killed by poison in such a muddle-headed manner. The 7 brawny men's expressions changed, and they abruptly pushed Queen Fu Sha away and jumped up, running toward a nearby tree as if they were flying. Blurg! One of the brawny men began to vomit while leaning against a tree. The other brawny men also began to puke while gasping for breath. Queen Fu Sha only felt a sour stench waft into her nose, and she felt nauseous. Queen Fu Sha's shoulders shrugged slightly. She turned around and saw her 7 subordinates vomiting dizzily while leaning against a tree. Unexpectedly, she also couldn't help but run to the other side and vomit as well. Arbor was baffled and muttered to himself, "She didn't eat a vomiting pill." Everyone present was an almighty with profound cultivation. When they heard this, they all looked at Sir Jojo as if they were looking at a little monster. As it turned out, the reason why those 7 unlucky fellows vomited was because they didn't take any antidote at all, but vomit pills. Queen Fu Sha was also funny. Her subordinate took the vomit pill and ran off to vomit, and she actually followed him and vomited. The 7 burly men vomited for about half an incense stick's worth of time. Their stomachs were filled with acid, and they were seeing stars. In the end, he sat down on the ground and panted heavily. He felt as if there were fragments of stars flying around him. So dizzy the 7 men's stomachs were almost empty, but when they turned their heads and saw their companions' faces, they couldn't help but feel nauseous. They turned their heads and began to retch again. Holy Sun Mi Yen was speechless as he looked at Queen Fu Sha's group of 8. Inexplicably, a trace of sympathy emerged in his heart. Back then, when he was at his most unlucky, he only lived in an empty house without anything. The little stoic wouldn't go so far as to feed him a strange medicine like a vomit pill. But now, looking at the queen and her party's misfortune, it seemed that the little stoic wasn't so unreasonable to him back then. Liang Qingqing suppressed her laughter with difficulty. She cleared her throat and said in deadly earnest, I think it's getting late. The temple's holy sun, shouldn't we set out? Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at Liang Qingqing indifferently. Wait a bit longer. There are still people who haven't arrived. Chapter 3000. Everyone reflexively glanced in Holy Sun Mi Yan's direction. This Sir Holy Sun had been unperturbed since the beginning, as if he was waiting for someone to arrive. Could it be that the temple had sent an even more formidable expert aside from this Holy Sun? While everyone was thinking this, they vaguely heard the elegant sound of wind music drifting into their ears from afar. When they looked up, they saw a sky full of flowers drifting down. 4 to 5 young women in white muslins slowly descended from the sky while surrounding a young lady in white clothes with her skirt fluttering in the wind, as if a celestial maiden descending to the mortal world. Arbor glanced at them and couldn't resist rolling his eyes. Every time that holy daughter appeared, she would always have people scatter flowers to welcome her respectfully. However, there wasn't such a grand display today. There were only 4 to 5 young girls flying around her with their own petals and halos. Compared to the first time they met in the imperial capital, when she was surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people, this was indeed a scene that paled in comparison to the first time. Greetings to Holy Daughter. Everyone from the temple bowed in greeting. Holy Sun Mi Yen glanced at Nye Yaoguang apathetically and nodded at her. Yaoguang, have the people from the other 3 academies all arrived? Holy Daughter Nye Yaoguang stepped forward and bowed slightly toward Holy Sun Mi Yen. She nodded and said, the people from Flying Sword Academy, Hong Estate, and Blue Ocean Academy have all arrived. Go count the number of people. Holy Sun Mi Yen said indifferently, if everyone is here, then we'll set off. Nye Yaoguang nodded. From beginning to end, she looked straight ahead and didn't shift her gaze even half an inch toward Arbor. She didn't know if it was because she was scared by the little stoic's previous beating or if she really didn't want to pay attention to her, but she completely ignored the stoic face. Since she ignored Arbor, Arbor naturally wouldn't take the initiative to pay attention to her. Seeing that Holy Daughter Nye Yaoguang led people to the side to count the number of people, Miss Qiao stood to the side and waited calmly. Before long, Nye Yaoguang returned to the Holy Sun's side and nodded at that person. Everyone is basically here, except for Madame Gua and a few others who haven't. Sorry, I'm late. A voice suddenly interrupted Nye Yaoguang's words. Immediately after, everyone saw a plump lady with a black veil covering her face, leading a burly man and an old man with a black beard forward. Arbor recognized that sturdy man. He was precisely the one he had encountered in the small courtyard that day when he rescued 5th young Master Qin. The black-bearded old man had a pair of dignified tiger eyes. Arbor had never seen him before. The old man's cultivation seemed to be quite high, but he couldn't tell what realm he was in at a glance. When Madame Goen walked up to the Holy Sun, she finally saw clearly that the little stoic was standing to the side. Madame's face immediately darkened. Without saying a word, she summoned a spiritual weapon from her mind and threw it at the expressionless Sir Jojo. This damned little stoic, she'd used a spirit weapon this time. Let's see how she dodged it. Arbor stretched out his hand and pushed out a circular ripple-shaped pattern, directly using the water spirit to imprison the spirit weapon Madame had thrown inside. The friction between the air currents produced a series of clattering sounds. For a moment, that spirit weapon was immobilized inside the water spirit circle and couldn't break through that circle's barrier no matter how hard it tried. Madame Goen's face immediately darkened to the extreme. She clenched her teeth and activated the spirit weapon in her hand, wishing for nothing more than to slit a large hole in the little stoic's neck on the spot. It would be best if she could be taught a lesson on the spot. Chapter 3001. Bang! Prince Immerse slightly narrows his eyes. With a light flick of his sleeve, the spiritual weapon sent over by Madame Gowan is quickly pushed away. Unable to withstand the gravity, that spiritual weapon suddenly flies backwards. With a chi sound, it passes through several trees before finally collapsing high up in the sky. A perfectly good spiritual weapon has actually turned into a piece of scrap metal in an instant, falling to the ground with a dong-dong sound. Madame Gowan is so angry that her eyes turn red. Emolien. This guy is simply too infuriating. Does he even put this aunt of mine in his eyes? In broad daylight, under the watchful eyes of so many people, he actually acted so recklessly. Most importantly, he completely destroyed the spiritual weapon that she had painstakingly taken out. Madame Gowan looks at the spiritual weapon lying on the ground, which has already lost its radiance. She inwardly grinds her teeth in anger. Emolien coldly glances at her. Gowan, this crown prince has given you face. Don't be ungrateful. Madame Gowan's face immediately turns deathly pale from anger. Seeing this, Holy Sun Mi Yen hurriedly steps forward and stops Madame Gowan. Since Madame Gowan has already arrived, then let's set off. Madam? Holy Sun Mi Yen slightly shakes his head at Madame Gowan. His meaning is very obvious. He wants her to quickly calm down, lest she really suffers a big loss. Madame Gowan immediately calms down slowly. Looking at Prince Mo and Arbor in front of her, and then glancing at the unfriendly crowd beside the two of them, Madame Gowan takes a deep breath and slowly lets go of her killing intent. She indifferently says, "Then let's set off." Bang! Suddenly, a ball of divine power bounces in front of Madame Gowan at a speed comparable to light. Madame Gowan didn't notice what happened at first, but when she clearly sees that it's a ball of divine power that has jumped in front of her, her expression suddenly changes greatly. And an old man beside her slightly waves his hands, pushing Madame Gowan behind him. A powerful defensive force erupts from his body, fiercely catching the power of the ball of divine power. When the two collided, the old man's face turned slightly pale. He stood straight in front of Madame Gowan and retreated 3 or 4 steps. Under the protection of the short-bearded old man, Madame Gowan passed through safely, but her face was a little pale from anger, and her chest couldn't help but jump up and down because of this sudden accident. She took a deep breath, her gaze seemingly dipped in poison as she glared at Xiao Mu. The Crown Prince Consort is too audacious. This damned girl actually threw a ball of divine power at her without saying a word. If Mr. Zhao wasn't here today, the National Security Agency would definitely suffer a great loss. The little crown princess looked at her coldly. Suddenly, she waved her hand, and the startled swan dagger, which was hidden in the air, suddenly attacked Madame Gua's neck. No sooner said than done. At that critical moment, the black-bearded old man, Mr. Zhao, pushed Madame Gowan behind him and summoned an extremely powerful water spirit energy with one hand. In an instant, the startled swan dagger that was flying over was sealed in a block of ice by this Mr. Zhao. It couldn't stop trembling and was actually unable to break out of the ice block's encirclement in a short period of time. Mo Lien frowned slightly. She raised her finger and a flame rushed over, directly burning the block of ice that was wrapped around the startled swan dagger. After burning for less than a minute, that block of ice suddenly cracked, and the startled swan dagger jumped out. With an even faster speed, it flew towards Madame Gowan's neck. Chapter 3002. Rip. There was a light sound. Madame Gowan only felt a slight chill on her neck. When she touched it with her hand, she discovered that the little stoic's startled swan dagger had cut a long gash on her neck. The little stoic stood outside the crowd like this and coldly looked at her. She said indifferently, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." For some reason, Madame Gowan's heart suddenly chilled. She only felt that the little girl in front of her was sinister and vengeful, simply not like a normal little girl. No, she couldn't be this impulsive. This little stoic didn't seem to have a high cultivation, but when it came to actual combat, her abilities were much higher than hers. She had to carefully plan before continuing to attack. Otherwise, she would be tricked every time. Just thinking about it made her extremely unwilling. When Madame Gowan thought of this, she took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions with all her might, returning to tranquility. Holy Sun Mi Yen pressed his aching head and hastily stepped forward. He stood between the stoic face and Madame Gowan and said in a low voice, "All right. Don't make a fuss about anything. Now that everyone is here, we'll leave through the transportation portal. Let's go to the nearest three-river pier to board a boat first." Since the Holy Sun said this, the others naturally nodded in agreement and clustered around him as they walked towards the transportation portal. There were several transportation portals in this great north-facing forest. This forest was truly too large, so transportation portals had been set up in all directions. This greatly facilitated the people who came here to experience the world. Holy Sun Mi Yen led everyone directly to the great north-facing forest from this transportation portal, near the three-river pier. The people who walked out of the tactical matrix followed behind Holy Sun Mayan. After looking around for a while, they followed Holy Sun Mayan and walked towards the Sanjiang Wharf. This place wasn't far from the three-river pier, and it was less than a 10-minute walk. From afar, they could see boats coming and going at the pier. The boatmen were busy loading and unloading goods, and it was bustling with activity. Arbor followed not far behind Holy Sun Mi Yen. As he pulled Mo Lien along, he couldn't resist looking around curiously. There were at least 200 to 300 people in their group, so it was impossible to say that they weren't eye-catching. They suddenly walked over from the direction of the teleportation formation, which immediately attracted the attention of many young men on the pier. "The boatman we contacted is just ahead," Holy Sun Mi Yen said indifferently. "Follow me." Holy Sun Mi Yen had already chartered a boat and agreed on the return time with the boatman. Therefore, he easily found the boatman that he had made an appointment with. Not long after everyone boarded the ship, the two-storied ship began to move forward slowly. Holy Sun Mi Yen sent someone to inform everyone, "We will be able to enter Du Chunjiang's range in about a day. After entering the Du Chunjiang, be careful. This is a no-fly zone. If you force your way into the air, you'll have to bear the consequences." Their days were finally stable, and the little stoic finally had time to catch up with Sid Yi and the others. She introduced Qi Xianxian and the others to them. Liang Qingqing said excitedly, "We have been stifled in the fire refining city for a long time. It was not easy for the Sun Moon Temple to select people to enter the secret realm to gain experience, so we volunteered to come. But I didn't expect to meet little junior sister here. Now that I think about it, everything is really guided by fate." Sidui also couldn't resist chuckling. What junior sister Liang says is very reasonable. The next morning, a boatman came and banged on the door vigorously. "Sir Holy Sun is calling for everyone to come out quickly." Chapter 3003. When Arbor and Emolien walked to the deck hand in hand, they saw a sea of heads. Everyone was standing still on the deck. Holy Sun Mi Yen was standing at the front, gazing at the distant riverbank. The ship only needs to stop at 10-Mile Pier to pick up 2 experts. Holy Sun Mi Yen said to everyone, "Up ahead is Dukhun Riverbank. The people of Spring City should be conducting a large-scale sacrificial ceremony. There are a lot of people, so don't disembark if you can." Holy Sun Mi Yen coughed lightly and said, "Those who really can't hold back and want to watch the show, don't go too far after disembarking. After we pick up the people, we'll set off immediately in about 2 hours. Don't leave yourselves behind at that time." After saying that, he deliberately found the little stoic in the crowd and looked her up and down. Thereupon, the priests next to Holy Sun Mi Yen, as well as some students from the Royal Academy, all looked at the little stoic in unison. The stoic face didn't have the slightest expression, but Sir Jojo's heart was galloping. What's going on? Is there something wrong with Holy Sun Mi Yan's eyesight? Why did he deliberately sweep his gaze over and focus on Sir Jojo? It's as if this sir is stirring up trouble everywhere. This sir is clearly very easy to talk to. Liang Qingqing and the others couldn't resist covering their mouths and snickering. Since we're stopping for 2 hours and it looks quite lively up ahead, Jojo, how about we disembark and take a stroll? Sir Jojo's large eyes were spirited as he looked around. He coughed lightly and said with a reluctant expression, "Since you guys want to disembark and take a look so much, then I'll accompany you guys for a stroll." Everyone couldn't help but twitch their mouths. You say it like you're reluctant, but you're actually very excited on the inside. Spring City's large-scale sacrificial ceremony was currently in full swing. Many young men and women crowded around the riverbank with offerings on their heads. It was a noisy and boisterous scene. The elder in charge of the sacrificial ceremony was a cyan-robed elder. He held a long staff and muttered a long string of words. Soon after, he shouted in a clear voice, "Let the sacrificial ceremony begin." The heavy sound of drums was played, accompanied by the roars of 2 rows of bare-chested brawny men, which sounded very rhythmically. Arbor's group landed on the riverbank, but they didn't squeeze into the crowd. Instead, they walked around the stalls along the riverbank. Qi Xianxian couldn't help but whisper, "Are they holding an early spring ceremony?" The little stoic naturally wouldn't care about their sacrificial offerings. Everyone was in a good mood today. Whenever they saw something delicious or fun, they wanted to buy it. This was especially true for Spring City's local specialty, soy sauce pork ribs. Qi Xianxian, this glutton, tasted it and felt that it was very good. Thus, she bought a lot of it and distributed it to everyone. As the group strolled around, they heard the drumming of the sacrificial ceremony becoming more and more urgent. Suddenly, he was interrupted by a heart-wrenching cry. Everyone turned to look at the source of the sound. A group of muscular men with bare arms carried trays of sacrificial offerings forward. Although the crowd was crowded, they still maintained order. When the muscular men walked past, everyone moved to the sides, leaving a path in the middle that could accommodate 2 people walking side by side. At this time, Qi Xianxian and the others saw that 3 animals, 5 grains, and all kinds of rare and exotic fruits were arranged on the offering trays like flowing water. The cry came from the crowd. An old woman staggered forward with the sacrificial procession and reached out several times, wanting to grab the offering trays. Unfortunately, she was short and couldn't reach the large trays that the muscular men were carrying over their heads. Chapter 3004. Arbor and the rest saw from afar that there was a young girl tied up on the tray. She was kneeling there with an ashen face and a depressed look in her eyes. The old woman cried along with the group, mournfully calling out the young girl's name. However, even if she screamed until her throat was hoarse, no one would pay attention to her. Seeing this, little Fatty's spirit was shaken. He rubbed his fists and shouted, "I'll go over and find out what happened." His reputation of being a nosy person was not for nothing. In less than 10 minutes, little Fatty squeezed out of the crowd. With a sigh, he said to Arbor, Qi Xianxian and the rest, "Do you know? Today, they are worshipping the immortals in the river. They have prepared so many resources and are planning to throw them all into the Duchun River when the auspicious time arrives." However, in recent years, there has been a bad habit in Spring City. Every other year, they will use living women who are 25 years old and have not yet married as sacrifices. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. Liang Qingqing could not help but shiver. She cursed in her heart and said, "What? Are they discriminating against older unmarried girls?" She, Liang Qingqing, was 21 years old this year. According to the rules of Spring City, she would be in danger in 4 years. She might even become a sacrifice for the immortals in the river. Lord Xiao Xiao blinked her eyes and looked at the little fatty curiously. The city is so big, so there must be a lot of unmarried women who have reached the age of 25. Why did you capture that lady as a sacrifice? Little Fatty touched his nose and coughed. It's strange. This Spring City is really weird. They choose their sacrifices based on their beauty. Among the 25-year-old unmarried girls, they choose the prettiest girl. Liang Qingqing suddenly shivered. She secretly compared her appearance to the girl on the tray. She felt that she was more beautiful than the girl on the tray. She suddenly felt lucky that she was not from this weird Spring City. Otherwise, in 4 years, It might be her turn to become a sacrifice in the river. Little Fatty chuckled and glanced at Liang Qingqing. As if guessing what she was thinking, he hurriedly said, "Don't panic, this is only for ordinary people." Thinking about it, a level 5 fire spirit master like Liang Qingqing would not be so easily subdued and become Du Chuanjiang's sacrifice. Even so, Liang Qingqing and the others were still unconvinced. They rubbed their fists and were eager to give it a try. "I'll go save that poor girl. Why should a good-looking girl become a sacrificial offering in this river without getting married at the age of 25? The little fatty hurriedly stopped Liang Qingqing. "Let's wait and see." The main thing was that he didn't know the situation. If he acted rashly, it might not be of much help to others. However, Liang Qingqing was an impatient person. "Didn't you already ask around? There's no time to lose. You guys wait here. I'll go alone." After saying that, Liang Qingqing was about to squeeze out of the crowd and walk towards the sacrificial procession. Arbor immediately grabbed her arm and said with a serious face, "Let me do it." Everyone was speechless. The little girl's expression was eager to try. Naturally, they didn't want to spoil her mood. She wanted to see what kind of god this immortal in the river was. He actually tricked so many people to come and pay their respects. Arbor didn't say anything and quickly walked in front of the sacrificial procession. Chapter 3005. And at this time, the elderly presiding over the sacrifice had already impatiently ordered 2 people to go forward and pull that old woman away. The old woman couldn't resist wailing loudly. "You can't do this. I beg you, let my daughter go." Liang Qingqing still couldn't hold back and followed closely behind the little stoic to the sacrifice team. "Hurry and release her." These people were truly too excessive. She wasn't their daughter, so they didn't feel any heartache even after throwing her into the river. To put it bluntly, these people only dared to lay their hands on commoners. If it was someone with true status, they naturally wouldn't allow themselves to be manipulated as they wished. When the elderly presiding over the sacrifice heard this, he glanced at them coldly. "Someone, disperse all the unrelated people. Continue with the sacrifice." With a light swish, the 2 burly men holding the living tray above their heads felt their shoulders go numb. Their bodies trembled slightly, and they involuntarily fell backward. He was very clear that he had fallen into someone's trap, but he simply couldn't control himself. He could only watch helplessly as he fell backward with a bang, landing headfirst on the ground. The girl on the tray naturally lost her balance and fell down. When Liang Qingqing saw this, she couldn't help but be amused. She quickly rushed forward and supported that girl, allowing her to steady herself. An attack talisman flew up from Arbor and directly pounced at that gloomy elderly man. "Since someone must be the sacrifice, why don't you go?" That elderly man was dumbstruck. Before he could react, he felt his body being forcefully pulled by a force, and he flew uncontrollably toward the riverbank. The elderly man yelled in alarm. The people around him all reached out in a flurry, wanting to grab him, but they simply couldn't resist that pulling force. The sacrifice team instantly fell into chaos. Everyone screamed in disarray and fled toward the back of the crowd. In just an instant, the staff in the cyan robe elder's hand flew out, and he uncontrollably rolled toward the riverbank. After a loud splash, what made everyone dumbfounded was that the old man really rolled into the river. Prince Emo couldn't help but grimace. He raised his hand to cover his face. He didn't see anything. His wife definitely didn't cause any trouble. Duanyu took a step forward and calmly turned to sweep a glance at Emolien. He couldn't resist frowning strangely. "What's with that expression of yours? Was this guy trying to hypnotize himself that he didn't see anything?" Mu Xingqian's figure flashed, and he used spiritual energy to separate the crowd before hastily rushing to the little stoic and Liang Qingqing's side. "What are you spacing out for? Quick! Big brother Mu can't be thinking that the little stoic will suffer, right?" Duanyu couldn't resist muttering. According to his understanding of the little fellow, the next one to suffer would definitely be the enemy on the other side. Less than a few seconds after the elderly man fell into the river, the entire Du Chunjiang suddenly flared up. Everyone retreated several steps in terror. Someone shouted, "The immortal in the river has been infuriated," and everyone fled in all directions in a hubbub. At the same time, a huge wave surged out of the river and splashed toward the riverbank with a splash. At first glance, everyone saw the old man being lifted up by the water and tumbling out of the river. Chapter 3006. With a second glance, she was horrified to see a large water snake suffused with an oily green glow burrowing out from behind the elderly man and swallowing him into its stomach in one gulp, not giving him the slightest chance to react. That water snake spat out a bolt of lightning that landed in the water, creating a sizzling electric current that struck towards the riverbank like a bolt of lightning. Qi Xianxian cursed in her mind and reflexively reached out to pull on the little stoic's arm. However, in the blink of an eye, the little stoic had already acted. Several defensive talismans landed in front of them, blocking the lightning that was snaking towards them at lightning speed. At this time, Mu Xingxian had already rushed over and threw out a dozen fireballs without any explanation. They danced in the air as they collided with the water snake that had suddenly burrowed out of the river. After a few sizzling sounds, everyone could clearly see that when the fireball touched the scales of the water snake, the flames disappeared. The little stoic blinked and couldn't help but lament softly, "This large water snake can't be the immortal in the river that Spring City worships, right?" Liang Qingqing nodded. "It's very possible." She grabbed the little stoic's hand and retreated, involuntarily exclaiming, "This water snake nests in this river all year round, so it should be the overlord of this area." Just as she finished speaking, a row of sword-toothed fish leaped out from the riverbank. They leaped half a meter high and pecked through a stone tablet on the riverbank in a few moves. Upon seeing this, Arbor involuntarily creased his brows, thinking that this guy had quite a few helpers. However, it was fortunate that these things could only stay in the water. Once they came ashore, they were like tigers without fangs and were nothing to be afraid of. The sacrificial ceremony had long ended. Everyone wasn't an idiot, and those who could escape had already fled without a trace. The remaining sacrificial procession had also thrown away the sacrificial offerings in their hands and mostly fled. Mu Xingxian circled a defensive talisman with his hand and blocked Sir Jojo, Liang Qingqing, and the others. Mo Lian and Duan Yu also hurried over. However, before the two of them could make a move, they heard a delicate rebuke from afar. Immediately afterwards, a sword light landed in the water, creating a huge splash with a bang. The big water snake roared and swung its tail. With a boom, its tail swept across the surface of the water, rolling up a huge wave. At this moment, Holy Sun Miyan had also stepped on the water surface and hurried over. When he saw the situation on the riverbank, the corners of his eyes couldn't help but twitch as he felt a little uncomfortable. What's going on? Didn't they say they shouldn't cause trouble? Why did it still cause such a huge commotion? He propped up a defensive spiritual barrier with both hands, blocking out the watery light that filled the sky. He had already stepped on the water's surface and swiftly arrived beside the little stoic and the others. Holy Sun Miyan couldn't help but roar, "What are you doing?" At this moment, the giant water snake in the river was clearly enraged by everyone's repeated provocations. "Be careful. This water snake is a level 10 divine beast." The woman who reminded them was the one who had dropped the sword light from the sky. The little stoic glanced at her before shifting her gaze to the woman next to her. She stared intently at the newcomer and racked her brain. Why does she look so familiar? So it's Princess Jing of the Pangu clan from the Aurora Sandfield. Mo Lian nodded indifferently. It was only now that she realized the expert's Holy Sun Miyan was waiting for were actually these two people from the Pangu clan. The little stoic, who didn't recognize people, suddenly came to a realization and stared fixedly at the woman next to Princess Jing of the Pangu clan. She is? Chapter 3007. She really looked very familiar, but Arbor couldn't recall where she had seen her before. The little stoic calmly blinked her eyes. She saw that woman's eyes seemed to be poisoned with venom when she glanced at her. The little stoic racked her brains for a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through her mind, and she couldn't resist saying, "Oh, you're that idiot who sent several hundred people to kill me near Mount Daizong in Poland Prefecture, right?" What was her name again? The little stoic already couldn't remember clearly. What was going on? Wasn't this woman already dead? Because she had personally executed this person, her impression of her was rather deep. She was very clear that she wouldn't show mercy. Back then, at the entrance of Wanlu Town's Shunlai Inn, she had slashed a bloody wound on her neck. She made a bloody cut on the woman's neck. Judging from the way she dealt with people, there was no way she could have survived. But this person was actually alive. Not only was she alive, but her cultivation had also advanced. Evidently, this woman who had come back from the dead already had a cultivation realm above hers. Even with her heaven-defying cultivation speed, she still wasn't as fast as the other parties. The little stoic blinked, and her fair and tender face subconsciously tensed up. One had to know that back in Wanlu Town, this woman's cultivation was clearly far inferior to hers. The unhappy little stoic suspiciously swept her gaze over that woman. At this time, the latter finally lifted her head and looked straight at Arbor with a faint smile on her face. Her pitch-black eyes seemed to contain two malicious vipers as she stared coldly at her without saying a word. Suddenly, a heavy pressure rushed toward Arbor. Without any warning, the little girl only felt her breathing turn heavy, as if her body would be crushed by a tall mountain at any moment. In the blink of an eye, Prince Mo pulled his wife into his arms to protect her, a trace of anger surfacing in his eyes. At the same time, Mu Xingshan also narrowed his eyes. With a flick of his sleeve, he instantly rebounded the pressure released by the other party. Cough. The woman took a few steps back before she managed to stabilize herself. Her face was flushed red from holding back her anger. Jing Minyao. Princess Jing frowned. She was very displeased with her third younger sister for finding trouble for no reason. Did Jing Minyao forget the pain after the wound healed? She had already died once, but she was still so willful. Wang Liming did not know how to teach her daughter. Now that the Crown Prince of Shenzhou was standing in front of them, what good would come of attacking his little crown princess rashly? Jing Minyao's brainless approach was ridiculous. Do you want to die? The Crown Prince was furious. With a slight movement of his hand, he pulled Sir Jojo down. The little guy's gaze circled around Jing Minyao's body with a trace of curiosity. This person could not die for the time being. As a curious child, she wanted to find out why this person came back from the dead. In reality, faint ripples were surfacing in Xiao Mu's heart right now. Even those who had their throats slit by her were able to come back to life. It was clear that this family had a secret treasure that no one knew about. If she seemed to have grasped a strange inspiration, but before she could continue thinking, that hissing water snake swung its tail and swept toward the shore. Splat! The tail slapped the riverbank, directly smashing 200-year-old trees into pieces. Chapter 3009. The sacrificial maiden that Liang Qingqing had saved earlier had already escaped with her mother. The few of them didn't pay much attention to it. They were just casually saving someone, so there was no need for others to come forward and thank them. If they left, then so be it. It was quite worry-free. Arbor and Mo Lian's group returned to the ship and saw that the two sisters, Jing Linyao and Jing Minyao, had also boarded the ship. Miss Qiao looked at Jing Minyao meaningfully and secretly tugged at her husband's sleeve. Mo Lian nodded slightly in understanding and pulled her little hand to the stern of the ship. The two found a secluded spot at the stern of the ship and then whispered to each other. "Wife, why are you always tugging at me and not letting me deal with that woman?" Prince Mo rubbed his little wife's head. Now that this person is a level 3 divine master, it will be somewhat difficult for you to deal with her. Yet Xiao Mu was perplexed no matter how much she thought about it. How did she get promoted so quickly? Do you still remember the clan's secret technique that I mentioned to you before? Arbor suddenly understood. You're saying that this Jing Minyao was cultivated using a secret technique. She used Mithril to comprehend one of the 5 spirit origins, skipped the spirit realm, and went straight to the divine realm? Lien nodded with a straight face. Arbor blinked and patted Lien's chest. Don't worry, I will run if I can't beat her. Lien inexplicably wanted to laugh. She reached out and pulled her to her side. She lowered her head and rubbed her little face. Little liar. When have you ever run away when you fight? In the end, didn't she get really angry when she fought with her opponent? The stronger the opponent, the stronger she became. Arbor moved her little mouth, wanting to say something to defend herself, but after thinking about it, it seemed that it was indeed as Lien said. She pretended to cough and then said, Lien, what treasure does the Jing clan have? Are you talking about Jing Minyao's resurrection? Lien said softly, I've always heard that the Jing clan indeed has a treasure that can pass down the yin and yang fortune called the soul congregation bell. This soul-gathering bell can gather a person's soul, reverse the yin and yang of heaven and earth, and bring back the dead. Rumor has it that people who have been dead for more than 10 years can be revived with the help of the soul-convening bell. As long as the body is intact, resurrection is not a problem at all. A trace of excitement flashed across the little stoic's face, and she reached out to grab Lien's arm at once. What's wrong, Jojo? Soul-gathering bell, I. She finally knew what the spark that flashed through her mind was. She wanted this soul congregation bell. Since the soul congregation bell could bring the dead back to life, then her senior sister who had been sealed in the ice coffin for many years, could you want to use the soul congregation bell to revive senior Su Shanshan? Arbor nodded her little head vigorously. Lien muttered to himself for a moment before nodding and saying, perhaps it can work. But Jojo, let's put this out in advance. Senior sister Su has passed away for many years, and no one can say for sure or guarantee something as ethereal as a soul. Whether the soul congregation bell can gather senior sister Su's soul again, whether it can truly wake senior sister Su up, this matter is still more of a legend after all. Arbor's large, watery eyes curved slightly. She actually understood Lien's meaning. He wanted to tell her not to have too much hope. We will do our best for this matter. Chapter 30:10. But as for whether we can succeed or not, that will depend on the will of the heavens. Lien held her little hand and said softly, what I mean is, even if we really can't save senior sister Su, you can't be too disappointed. He was really afraid. Thinking about the 2 years she disappeared, he couldn't help but feel a little panicked. He was afraid that the little fellow would be disappointed and sink into her pessimistic mood again. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the light in her eyes. So at this moment, his heart was full of hatred for Jing Minyao. If she hadn't come back from the dead, Jojo wouldn't have coveted the Jing family's sacred weapon. The little fellow held his large hand and nodded vigorously. Don't worry, I will adjust my mood and definitely won't let myself sink into it. Lien nodded and said softly while holding her little hand, it said that this soul-gathering bell can only be used 3 times. And as far as I know, when the bell was in the Jing family's hands, there were only 2 chances left. This response was wasted on Jing Minyao, so there's only 1 chance left. Arbor subconsciously clenched her little fist. I wonder who has this thing now. Princess Jing? Although Princess Jing was a scheming person, Arbor actually admired her magnanimous temperament. Compared to Jing Minyao's incompetence, this Princess Jing was simply the Jing family's glory and hope. The perfect example of a bad bamboo producing good bamboo shoots. Let's test it out first. Lien narrowed her eyes and chuckled. Anyway, there will be plenty of opportunities along the way. Arbor thought that was right and pulled her husband back to the deck. The moment they stepped onto the deck, they saw Jing Minyao leaning against the railing and staring at them silently. Arbor didn't speak to her and walked straight to Holy Sun Mi Yen. Hey, look at the sky, it's going to rain tonight. Tell the boatman to hurry up, don't get caught in the middle of the river. With the storm, the boat will… Hey. Shut up. Holy Sun Mi Yen really wanted to reach out and cover the little fellow's crow mouth. What are you saying? Wasn't the weather perfect? Why would there be a storm? Do you think you're an emissary of the heavenly faction? Do you think you can just say that the wind will blow and the rain will fall just because you say so? Peepa. As soon as he finished speaking, a bolt of lightning rushed down and struck the side of the mast, scaring the boatmen. The corners of everyone's mouths twitched as they looked at the calm Lady Xiqiao with strange and indecipherable expressions. Holy Sun Mi Yan opened his watery eyes wide. He raised his head and looked at the pitch-black sky. Immediately, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. "Hurry up! The storm is coming!" Xiao Mu hollered at that Holy Sun Mi Yan and grumbled, "With your ship's sailing speed, the secret realm will have already ended by the time you reach it." This time, nobody treated it as a joke anymore. Holy Sun Mi Yan rushed all the way to the small control room and roared at the captain, Old he, stay calm." The storm arrived in less than a quarter of an hour. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other in dismay. Everyone silently chanted in their hearts, "Stoic face, you jinx! You're too smart." Crack! An S-shaped lightning split open a crack in the horizon, and the dark night was instantly illuminated by the lightning into a snowy day. Chapter 30:11. Coo-coo. The familiar chirping instantly stimulated Arbor's senses, causing her to be on guard at once. She raised her hand and gently swiped it, and a delicate crow-repeating crossbow appeared in Arbor's hand. From the horizon, the coo-coo sound could be clearly heard. Arbor looked up and saw 7 or 8 giant birds with black wings and sharp beaks flying in the direction of their ship. At the same time, the entire Du Chunjiang was filled with a layer of intertwined lightning. This lightning was intertwined in the sky above Du Chunjiang, dark purple with a hint of inky color, as if it could fall down at any time. Holy Sun Mi Yan was stunned for a moment and muttered to himself, "The sky above Du Chunjiang is forbidden to fly. No living thing can fly above Du Chunjiang." "So what's going on with those big birds that suddenly flew over?" Arbor coldly glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yan. "Isn't this your bird?" Hearing her angry tone, Holy Sun Mi Yan couldn't help but retort, "How is this my bird?" "Don't deny it," Arbor said coldly to him. "You know very well what kind of shady business the Sun Moon Temple is doing in the dark." Holy Sun Mi Yan was even angrier. He opened his mouth and was about to refute when he saw the little girl turn her head away, looking like she was too lazy to talk nonsense with him anymore. He couldn't help but feel suffocated. Arbor stretched out her arm and steadily held the crow-repeating crossbow. She directly shot a crow-gold arrow from it, aiming at the nightcaw bird in the air. With a swoosh, the crow-gold arrow was like a white light cutting through the night sky, flying towards the leading big bird like a meteor catching up with the moon. It hit the target in one shot. The big bird let out an ear-piercing chirp, struggling to flap its wings, and suddenly fell from the sky. Bang! It crashed into the water. At the same time, the nightcaw birds that were originally hovering back and forth in the sky were bombarded by the sweeping thunder and lightning above Du Chunjiang. For a moment, there were sharp chirping sounds. 7 or 8 nightcaw birds rampaged in the air and were constantly shot down by the thunder and lightning. Xiao Mu's gaze was a bit hesitant as she met Emol Yen's gaze. Was there something wrong with the nightcaw bird's brain? Why did he appear in Du Chunjiang, a place where flying was prohibited? Who were they trying to attack? Or perhaps, some idiot had hastily gathered them and completely forgot about the fact that Du Chunjiang was forbidden from flying. Arbor shifted his gaze to Nie Yaoguang and glanced at her. Naturally, he could not tell anything from her expression, but Arbor had a strange intuition that this matter was most likely caused by this brainless saintess. What kind of ghost bird is that? It can even swim in the water. A Hong Fu Academy student who was leaning against the railing of the deck couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw that the few big birds that had fallen into the river had already retracted their wings slightly. They swam wantonly in the water and pecked at the bottom of the ship. All the students secretly cursed in their hearts as they stared with their watery eyes at the edge of the ship's railing and looked down. Shit! These damn birds are pecking at the bottom of our ship. Just as the nightcaw bird was about to move, the storm that could no longer control itself finally swept over with a ferocious momentum. A thick bolt of lightning coincidentally struck the head of one of the nightcaw birds, causing it to fall into the water. Chapter 30:12. Suddenly, a large, slippery water snake's tail burrowed out from the bottom of the water and directly whipped back the night cowbird that wanted to peek out of the water. This night cowbird was probably beaten senseless. After it fell back into the water, it didn't emerge for a long time. The river water boiled like boiling water, and the level 10 divine beast that had appeared on the riverbank earlier suddenly appeared again. With a thrill of revenge, it fiercely swept its tail at their ship. Smith, Smith, Smith. The water snake's tail, which carried a trace of electricity, heavily whipped the ship's railing and directly pierced through it. The students who were originally standing beside the railing hastily retreated. Everyone reflexively activated their defensive spiritual weapons to withstand the violent wind and rain outside, in addition to the occasional flash of lightning. This was truly a trap. They encountered this kind of trap on their first night at Du Chunjiang. It was all the little stoic's fault for jinxing things. Truly, whatever she said came true, whatever came was unlucky. Look at the current situation. Fuck, it was simply unbearable to the extreme. At this time, everyone was caught in a dilemma. If they continued to let this water snake wantonly destroy their ship, everyone would have to go into the water. If they wanted to fight this water snake, they would have to tread on the waves and rise into the air to deal with it. However, with the lightning above their heads glaring at them like a tiger watching its prey, no one could fully concentrate on the battle under these circumstances. Arbor aimed at the water snake's tail and fired 2 arrows. The crow-gold arrows created sparks when they rubbed against the large water snake's scales, infuriating it on the spot. It hissed and stared fixedly at Xiao Mu with its cold, triangular eyes. It raised its long tail high up and smashed it at the people on the deck. "You're courting death." Arbor narrowed her eyes and suddenly leaped, about to jump into the river. Prince Mo, who was constantly paying attention to his wife's every move, jumped in fright when he saw this and hastily reached out to pull the little fellow back. Mu Xingchen was also startled and blocked Arbor with his hand. "Younger sister, what are you doing?" "Of course we're going to kill it, pull out its teeth, and give them to Lotus as refining materials." Everyone couldn't help but be speechless. This little girl spoke as if she wasn't going to kill a level 10 divine beast, but was only going to deal with a small low-level spiritual beast. Wasn't he overconfident? Didn't they see that Holy Sun Mi Yen, a spiritual venerable, was still considering how to attack? You suddenly want to jump into the river after slapping your head? How much confidence do you have in yourself? Mo Lien grabbed her little hand worriedly to prevent her from jumping down. "The Holy Son of the Divine Hall is here. Before we enter the secret territory, the Divine Hall should have the responsibility to protect us." At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen was holding up a defensive barrier. Hearing this, he couldn't help but want to spit on Mo Lien's face. What about the responsibility to protect them? Then who would protect the people in the Divine Hall? At this moment, Holy Sun Mi Yen saw that both of them were looking at his face. He was so angry that he didn't know where to vent. "The wind and rain are getting heavier. Let's talk inside the cabin first." Boom! The bottom of the boat seemed to have been hit by something heavy, and the whole boat couldn't help but tremble. At this moment, the boatmen all looked as if they were mourning for their loved ones. They shouted at Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Lord Holy Sun, it's not good, it's not good. You're the one who's not good. Your whole family is not good. Go to sleep, come back tomorrow morning at 9:30 to catch up on the chapters." Chapter 3013. What happened? Holy Sun Mi Yen grumpily roared. One of the boatmen said while trembling with fear, "Lord Holy Sun, the ship is moving sideways. Water is entering." Everyone silently cursed in their minds. This was terrible. Water was entering the ship. Could it be that they had to freaking swim across such a huge Du Chunjiang? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The Holy Sun was furious and roared, "What are you all standing around for? Go down and see if you can salvage the situation. You all of you come with me. Hurry and deal with that water snake." The little stoic looked up at her husband. When Holy Sun Mi Yen pointed at a series of you, just now he pointed at Sir Jojo. But didn't her husband say that the temple could resolve this kind of situation by itself? Why did he have to drag Sir Jojo in? The little fellow suspiciously swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. The latter grumpily turned around and shouted at her, "Hurry up! Mushroom, what mushroom? Hurry and come over!" The little fatty, who was called to repair the ship, nimbly moved his chubby body and ran off with several temple priests. The remaining people temporarily followed Holy Sun Mi Yen to the railing and used the power of the 5 spirits to attack the nightcaw birds and large water snakes below. This time, no one could continue to conceal their strength. They collectively attacked the things in the water and attracted their attention, no longer damaging the ship's hull. That level 10 divine beast was extremely powerful. Amidst the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, it nimbly moved like a bolt of white light. From time to time, it would burrow out from the bow and swing its tail. From time to time, it would also stick its head out from the side of the ship and deliver a fatal blow to the people repairing the ship below. Many boatmen lost their lives in its hands, and miserable screams could be heard from below from time to time. Arbor coldly swept Holy Sun Mi Yen a glance. "Have your people go down. Fight it at close range." This large water snake was so slippery that it could most likely dodge a long-range attack. In this way, not only would the people on the deck be wasting their spiritual energy for nothing, it wouldn't be of much use. At this time, Holy Sun Mi Yen was also enraged, and he turned to glance at Emo Lien and Duan Yu. "You, come down with me." Sir Jojo glanced at Holy Sun Mi Yen expressionlessly. Following the direction of Holy Sun Mi Yan's finger, he moved to the side. Then, Holy Sun Mi Yan's finger fell on the face of another person beside him. That person was the black-bearded old man beside Madame Goen. He was a level 5 divine realm expert, Mr. Zhao Guochang. Holy Sun Mi Yen was slightly dumbfounded. He was clearly pointing at the little stoic just now, but this damn doll actually dodged to the side without any trace of politeness, directly entrusting the mission to that black-bearded elderly man. Zhao Guochang's complexion was also very unsightly. He had already expended a lot of divine energy to resist Xiao Mu's divine energy ball just now. On top of that, he had also expended quite a bit of divine energy from attacking the great water snake earlier. If he could avoid going down to face the water snake, it would be best not to go down. Mr. Jojo threw a contemptuous glance at Holy Sun Mi Yen as if saying, "Are you all right? I'm still a baby. How could you ask me to do such a dangerous thing?" Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but twitch his mouth corners. When he was selecting people, he naturally selected the strongest to go with him. Although this damn doll's realm didn't look like much, it was obvious that she had plenty of good stuff on her. Chapter 30:14. With this little fellow assisting him from the side, his battle prowess would definitely increase by several levels. Duan Yu couldn't resist wanting to laugh. He took out a raven bone fan from his sleeve and leisurely fanned himself. "What? Mr. Zhao doesn't dare to go down?" Emo Lien didn't say anything and merely looked at that elderly gentleman with a faint smile. Zhao Guochang was a bit angry out of humiliation. Ever since he broke through the scope of a god realm cultivator and made a name for himself, no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a tone. This junior in front of him made him extremely angry, but he couldn't flare up for the time being. Mu Xingchen summoned a long sword from his conscience and walked to the railing. He turned to glance at Zhao Guochang. "Sir, please." Simply baffling. Zhao Guochang glared angrily at these juniors, but he couldn't vent his anger at all. Simply abominable. What were they trying to do by forcing a duck onto a perch for? Madame Goen's expression flickered, and she quickly said, "What are you all doing? Mr. Zhao is old. Duan Yu suddenly laughed and shook his head in disdain. "So he's a cowardly bandit. All right then, let's go." Let alone a god realm expert who couldn't bear to hear such words, even a random mystic realm cultivator wouldn't allow someone to crown him with the words, "cowardly bandit." Zhao Guochang couldn't help but be enraged, and he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Go!" This meant that he was convinced. Emo Lien glanced at him with a spurious smile. She leisurely removed her black velvet cloak and jumped onto the railing with a whoosh. Zhao Guochang's brain heated up, and he also jumped onto the railing and jumped down first. It was a miserable storm below, and the waves were as high as a two-story building. As soon as he went down, his whole body was drenched. The night cowbirds cooed, and their eyes flashed with green light as they swarmed towards him. Madame Gowan was very anxious and shouted sternly, "What are you all still standing there for? Quickly go down and help Mr. Zhao." From this, it could be seen that Holy Sun Mi Yen was a kind person. Almost without saying anything, he also jumped down. Qin Xian, Qin Xian, and Ming Yasi also leaped onto the railing. They cast a sidelong glance at Duan Yu and Mo Lien, who were standing on the railing and admiring the scenery, and silently cursed in their hearts. Shameless, shameless. After tricking the others down, these two actually had the nerve to continue watching. Here Mu Xingxian was also an honest child. He originally wanted to jump down with Holy Sun Mi Yen, but Duan Yu tugged at him. Hence, he stood there in a daze and looked back at the two of them. After Zhao Guochang and Holy Sun Mi Yen jumped down, they were surrounded by a large flock of night cowbirds. At the same time, that huge water snake also came out from one side and stared at the two of them with a pair of creepy triangular eyes. Chila. A bolt of lightning swept across the water. This water snake was clearly a fellow with thunder spirit energy, so it could fearlessly advance and retreat with a sense of propriety and avoid the lightning bolts that filled the sky. Zhao Guochang reinforced 3 layers of defense on his body, and his water spirit struck back, colliding head-on with the oncoming lightning bolt. Chila chila, sounds made people's hair stand on end. That lightning bolt abruptly broke through his water spirit, and an L-shaped sawtooth wriggled out from within, crashing towards Zhao Guochang's body with a whoosh. Chapter 30:15. At the same time, Prince Mo narrowed his eyes and moved like a rainbow flashing across the moon. Raven Moon was dyed with a speck of pitch-black cold light, and it cleaved a scarlet flame chain towards the water snake Zhao Guochang in front of her. After a loud splash, a scarlet wall of fire rose up from the water and burned fiercely in the night. At the same time, Duan Yu's raven bone fan also moved. Thousands of cold specks flew out and formed a circular encirclement, abruptly attacking Zhao Guochang's chest. These two people suddenly attacked almost without warning. Following this set of movements, they flew down and rushed behind Zhao Guochang like lightning. Zhao Guochang was shocked almost instantly. He simply couldn't believe that these two people would attack him for no reason under everyone's watchful eyes. However, there was no time for him to ponder. Raven Moon's sword light had already broken through Zhao Guochang's defenses and arrived in front of him. Zhao Guochang's eyes darkened, and he shouted angrily. A scale-like defensive item quickly formed on his chest, and he shouted, "Punk! You want to kill me? You're still too, Chi." A scorching flame attacked Zhao Guochang's chest. He originally thought that this godly armor could absolutely block any attack from these two juniors. Unfortunately, Zhao Guochang truly overestimated himself. Bam! He was sent flying by that fierce flame and retreated several steps. When he looked back in horror, he saw the water snake's sinister head peeking out from behind his head. Its gaping maw sent chills down one's spine. Zhao Guochang's body suddenly shrank, only to hear a kacha sound of bones breaking, accompanied by a sharp pain. Zhao Guochang only felt that his left shoulder was almost completely torn off, the pain causing his whole body to tremble. "Mr. Zhao!" Gowan couldn't resist shrieking. Mr. Zhao, this deity realm expert, was her greatest reliance on this trip. Now, Mr. Zhao was beaten half to death by two juniors before they even entered the mystic realm. How could she endure this? Pfft. Mr. Zhao spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. With a roar, he stretched out his other uninjured arm and used all his strength to support the water snake's ferocious head. The big water snake hissed twice, and its body couldn't help but twist twice, throwing out huge waves. Its pair of triangular eyes coldly stared at Zhao Guochang in front of it. Zhao Guochang was in so much pain that his body trembled slightly. Just as he was about to call for his spirit beast, the thousands of cold lights had already arrived in front of him. Without any delay, they shot into his body. With a series of muffled sounds, Zhao Guochang's body was like a sieve that had been shot through. Small light spots appeared on his body one after another. Then, like a ball that had leaked air, his body began to gasp for air. Holding a long staff, Holy Sun Mi Yen stared blankly at the scene before him. There was almost no room for him to react. It had only been 3 minutes since Emo Lien and Duan Yu joined hands, yet Zhao Guichang was already shot into a sieve. His entire body was covered in blood and bubbling with blood. No, it wasn't? This wasn't right. Holy Sun Mi Yen blankly thought. Just now, he clearly told everyone to join hands to deal with that big water snake. But why did the two of them, how did they attack Zhao Guichang? Before this, the two of them didn't give any warning, and he had never seen them discuss it with each other. This tacit understanding was too terrifying. That's it for now. We'll continue at midnight. Prepare to burn incense for the new year. Pray that I'll be prosperous in the coming year. Chapter 30:16. Sir Jojo watched the scene before him with sparkling eyes. He abruptly turned around and punched Madame Goen's face. No one will protect you now. Madame Goen was startled, and she reflexively bounced back before reflexively blocking with her hand. Bam! The defensive shield on her hand was instantly shattered by Arbor's punch, and she was sent flying backward by the force of the impact. Madame Goen crashed heavily into a wooden window on the side of the ship and flew in through the broken window before smashing onto the ground. She was dumbstruck for a moment. What? She was actually punched into the cabin from the outside by the little girl? Everyone stared at the little girl dumbfoundedly, unable to speak for a long time. The little girl's bad habit of taking action as soon as she said she wanted to. It was simply shocking. Wait, shouldn't they be allies right now? Evidently, in the little girl's eyes, people like Madame Goen couldn't be considered her allies at all. Previously at the Three River Pier, the little girl hadn't been able to find a chance to deal a vicious blow to Madame Goen due to the protection of that deity realm expert, Mr. Zhao. However, this didn't mean that she had forgotten the previous incident. Even Queen Fu Sha, who didn't mind the commotion, couldn't help but shudder. She didn't expect this girl to be so ruthless. Moreover, it had been a while since the incident, yet she was still bent on teaching Madame Goen a lesson. Xiao Mu stomped over and circled into the cabin through the hole in the window. She coldly said, "It's impolite not to reciprocate." Everyone, fuck, it was clearly such a vicious incident, but why did they feel like laughing? It's impolite not to reciprocate? Why did these words sound so familiar? Didn't the little fellow already nag about it when she was teaching Madame Goen a lesson? Could it be that the lesson from the first half wasn't over yet, and it continued until today, and the lesson only ended in the second half? Queen Fu Sha twitched her mouth with an odd expression. She recalled that they had merely eaten the other party's barbecue, but the freaking little stoic made them vomit for a full 10 hours. 10 hours! Now, whenever her subordinates saw someone barbecue, their hair would stand on end and they would keep a respectful distance. This was simply throwing up psychological trauma. In the future, even if the barbecue was placed in front of them, they probably wouldn't be able to eat it. What a shameless little pervert. Queen Fu Sha cursed in her heart. At this time, Arbor had already walked to Madame Goen's side. Looking at her frightened eyes, he twirled the long sword in his hand. "I let you go again and again. Do you think I'm afraid of you? You, what do you want? Don't act recklessly. If the great emperor knows, if you know, then you know." Arbor plunged his sword into Madame Guo's thigh. Ugh. Madame Goen was in so much pain that she sat upright. She twisted her body in fear and crawled backward. "You, don't come over, don't come over." Arbor reached out and gently pulled out the sword from her leg. He asked coldly, "Have you thought about how you want to die?" A few drops of dark red blood fell from the sword, but there was not a single red mark on the sword. Madame Guo's eyes widened in shock as she stared blankly at the little girl in front of her. "Yellow goat! Huang Yang!" Madame Goen seemed to have thought of something and shouted loudly. Chapter 30:17. Arbor glanced at her contemptuously. "Don't shout. It's useless even if you shout until your throat breaks." The little fellow used her sword to draw 2 lines in front of her chest. "I'm afraid that Mr. Zhao of yours is already dead. Now it's your turn." Arbor saw that she had one hand behind her back. She knew that she was up to no good and that she was definitely up to something. Sir Jojo only looked at the woman in front of him expressionlessly. He did not say anything. Duanmu Qing stepped in from outside the hole and hurriedly called out to her. "Jojo, is there some trouble?" As soon as he finished speaking, he saw Madame Goen, who was lying on the ground, suddenly straighten her body and roared. "Little slut, I'll let you have a taste of my power." Madame Goen's eyes were filled with vicious anger. She stretched out her hand and waved a handful of powder. Duanmu Qing hurriedly rushed forward. He originally thought that the little girl would be caught off guard and suffer a great loss. Who knew? The little girl was already prepared. She calmly took out a black frying pan from her inner world and slapped it directly on Madame Goen's face. With a loud bang, Madame Goen let out a miserable cry and fell backwards. Her big head heavily knocked against the deck of the boat, making a loud thud. The frying pan swatted away most of the powder, leaving only a small portion floating in front of Arbor. However, Sir Jojo was very guarded against this woman. He had already set up several layers of defense around himself without leaving a trace. Therefore, Madame Goen's little bit of powder was unable to break through her defense and be absorbed into her body. At this time, Duanmu Qing had already arrived in front of Arbor. He anxiously grabbed her arm. "Jojo, are you all right? What can happen to me?" Sir Jojo said expressionlessly. He used the frying pan to slap Madame Goen's face again. "The one who's not all right is this fellow." Duanmu Qing looked at the little fellow in front of him speechlessly. He coughed lightly and nodded. Looking at this lady's pitiful appearance, it was obvious that she did not get any benefits from Jojo. Madame Goen suddenly burst into tears. Crown Princess, you can't kill me." "The Crown Princess? I am the Crown Prince's aunt. If you kill me, how can you face the Empress in the future?" "Crown Princess, I know I was wrong. Why don't you spare me this time, Crown Princess?" Madame Goen cried with snot and tears. The scene was a bit funny. Xiao Mu's cold gaze swept over her, and she involuntarily creased her brows when she saw this fellow crying to this extent. She had never seen such a situation before. If this National Security Agency insisted on fighting with her to the end, she would just kill her. But now, he was kneeling on the ground and begging for mercy while crying out loud. It was really a bit of an eyesore. The little fellow pursed his little mouth and forcefully flung his sleeve that was grabbed by Madame Goen. He expressionlessly turned around and walked towards the deck. Stinking shameless thing. He was already so old, but he was still crying like a baby. In the future, when he saw Sir Jojo, he had to hurry and take a detour. Don't talk nonsense all day. Arbor had just arrived on the deck when she saw the big water snake creating a 3-meter-tall splash of water. It was like a raging wave that came towards her. She did not panic at all. She only glanced at the wave indifferently. Then she raised her small hand and drew a circle of defensive array glyphs around her. "Sleep, come back at 9:30 tomorrow morning." Chapter 30:18. Bang! While water splashed everywhere, Arbor had already flashed out like a bolt of lightning. The teleportation talisman flashed and disappeared, allowing Arbor to suddenly stand on the ship's railing. The river breeze brushed against Arbor's face, and her skirt fluttered. Arbor's black hair fluttered slightly, and the 3-foot-long sword in her hand glinted coldly. Her icy eyes had already met the great snake's gloomy eyes. Hiss! The little white snake on her wrist swiftly slithered and abruptly opened its towering mouth, biting at the oncoming great water snake. That great water snake certainly didn't expect the little girl to have a great snake's sacred beast coiled around her body. It seemed to be taken aback for a split second, and its snake head abruptly tilted to the side as it retreated in alarm. However, it was already too late. The little white snake's towering snake head had already lifted up, and its mouth bit down on the great water snake's vital point like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds. "Chi!" The great water snake hissed and swayed its body repeatedly, retreating with all its might in alarm, wanting to continue retreating back into the river to hide. At this time, the little white snake had already transformed into a great void serpent several dozen meters long, So how could it allow this guy to continue escaping? The little white snake opened its mouth and bit down on a square inch below the great water snake's head. In less than a few seconds, black smoke billowed out from the water snake's body, eyes, and mouth in wisps. That appearance was a bit frightening. After Mo Lien and the others finished dealing with the night cowbirds below, they turned around to look at the ship's railing. They saw the little stoic standing there like an expressionless little puppet. Her pitch-black eyes didn't move in the slightest under the night sky. And a great white snake several dozen meters long was loosely coiled around her several times in several coils of its tail. Its abdomen moved as it swallowed the water snake in front of it inch by inch. Holy Sun Mi Yen couldn't help but shudder at that terrifying appearance. The students of the other academies couldn't help but scatter like birds and beasts, shivering as they hid behind the destroyed cabins and by the broken wooden windows, watching the scene in front of them in horror. What kind of beast was this beside the little stoic? It could actually swallow a level 10 divine beast alive without any hesitation? Wasn't this too cruel? On the other hand, Xiao Mu creased her brows. Seeing that the white snakelet had already swallowed 2/3 of the large water snake, its stomach rumbling, she couldn't resist stroking the white snakelet as she muttered to herself, "Too full, spit it out." Finally, the little white snake swallowed the big water snake whole, including its skin and bones. The snake's belly bulged, and it even burped a few times. Crown Prince Mo and Duan Yu looked at each other, both at a loss for words. Burp. The little white snake suddenly shrank inch by inch, and its body returned to its original slender appearance. However, its abdomen was still bulging, as if it was several months pregnant. Burp. Its pitiful pair of large, watery eyes looked straight at Xiao Mu. Arbor couldn't help but knock on its head. "I told you to eat too much, but you didn't vomit when I told you to. You got indigestion from being greedy, so who are you blaming?" Sir Jojo quickly took out several bottles of digestion pills from her inner world and fed the little white snake one by one. As she fed it, she discovered that the little white snake's head slowly drooped down and curled up in her hand, unmoving. Arbor jumped in fright and quickly poked it with her finger. "Ming Ming! Ming Ming!" The little fellow was a bit anxious and poked it with her finger again. Chapter 30:19. Ming Ming. At this time, Mo Lien and Duan Yu had already jumped out of the water. Under the night wind, the water droplets on their bodies were slightly flung off, and with the evaporation of spiritual energy, the water droplets on their clothes instantly dried. "Jojo, don't be anxious." Mo Lien flashed to her side and gently grasped her hand. The little white snake swallowed a level 10 divine beast's flesh and crystal core, so it needs some time to digest. "I reckon this sacred beast is about to advance," Duan Yu said. "Master, it looks like Ming Ming is about to advance. Put it on planet Shaji for its advancement." The sapling Qiuqiu's words soon confirmed their conjecture. Xiao Mu nodded and fed the white snakelet several more pills to aid in digestion and advancement. Only then did she put it away on Shaji planet and have the sapling Qiuqiu find an open space for it to prepare for its advancement. Qiuqiu solemnly said, "Master, Ming Ming will probably need to sleep for a while. That divine beast is very helpful for its advancement, but it needs some time just to digest it." At this time, Arbor also discovered that the great ape on Fish Orchid Planet was pounding its chest and stamping its feet while howling at the sky. Arbor expressionlessly communicated with the sapling mentally. "What is it doing?" Qiuqiu chuckled mischievously. "The great ape is at the pinnacle of spirit beasts, so it needs some divine beast bloodline to advance." Realization dawned on Arbor. He didn't expect that the little white snake would swallow a level 10 divine beast in one go, so it naturally couldn't squeeze out any bloodline. Arbor was a bit curious. Does a spirit beast have to have a divine beast bloodline to advance to a divine beast? Of course. The sapling quickly explained to the little master. "Master, divine beasts aren't everywhere. Normally, they need a bloodline inheritance. It's even harder to find a sacred beast bloodline. Even if their ancestors have a sacred beast bloodline, not every one of them can become a sacred beast. The probability is still very small. However, if the ancestor does not have such a bloodline, Then there is not even such a small probability. Arbor nodded. Oh, tell it to stop howling. We'll find another one for it later. She had many small beasts that were top-grade spirit beasts by her side. If that was the case, she would have to find a few more divine beasts for them to advance. Master Silver, little white snake has gone to evolve. Do you want to bring Chio out with you? Your master isn't that weak. The little stoic said expressionlessly. Soon after, she thought for a bit and brought out the blue spirit snake emperor, who was currently frolicking in the 100 Poison Valley on Fish Orchid Planet. The little blue snake was dumbfounded. When it raised its little snake head and saw its little master, it couldn't help but shiver. It shrunk its head like a human and quickly closed its mouth to hide its 2 fangs. Little Master couldn't be thinking about Snake Tooth again, could she? It took so long for it to grow back. Sob, sob, sob. Xiao Mu expressionlessly said, "What are you cowering for? Isn't it just taking 2 drops of your venom every 3 months? It doesn't hurt." The little blue snake blinked its dog eyes cutely and rolled around in her hand like a corpse. Then, its snake body stiffened with its belly facing the sky without any integrity. Duan Yu couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he saw this. He exchanged a glance with Emo Lien next to him. Were the beasts by Jojo's side all so lacking in integrity? Emo Lien gave him an especially annoying look. Thankfully, his Sir Jojo didn't like little beasts that acted cute. Otherwise, these stinky things might have to compete with him for favor. Chapter 30-20. Emo Lien was about to pick up the little blue snake and toss it away. The little blue snake seemed to have sensed an unprecedented crisis and hastily coiled itself around Arbor's wrist. It obediently coiled itself into a circle and stopped moving like a corpse. Arbor was amused. He looked down at the little blue snake before looking up at Emo Lien and Duan Yu. With a swish. Thump, thump, thump. A series of urgent sounds came from the bottom of the ship. They soon saw the little fatty's nimble body dashing forward as he shouted, "There are several hundred to 1,000 sword-toothed fish digging into the ship below. I think the bottom of the ship is going to be pierced through very soon." Everyone was grief-stricken when they heard this. It wasn't that they were afraid. If it were any other time, the worst that could happen was that the ship would sink, and they would just fly up into the air. But in this current situation, with such dense thunderclouds hovering above Duchunjiang, they would dare to hack you to death if you dared to fly up into the air. Who dared to fly up recklessly? That would be asking for a beating. Thump, 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 thump. The sounds of the ship's bottom being pierced gradually grew louder in the stormy night, causing everyone's nerves to tighten to a critical point in an instant. Holy Sun Mi Yen rushed onto the ship despite the torrential rain and solemnly said to everyone, "Everyone, conserve your spiritual energy and pay attention to your defenses. When we enter the water later, we will need a defensive barrier to support us. Who knows how long we will struggle in the water?" On the side, Qi Xianxian rolled up her small sleeves. "Let's fight it out with them." How could a group of spiritual cultivators like them be afraid of several hundred sword-toothed fish? What a joke! Crack! The boatman shrieked in panic, "The bottom of the ship is leaking." Arbor turned to look at them with a frown. This ship employed more than a dozen normal boatmen. If they entered the water, they wouldn't have any chance of survival. The teeth of the sword-toothed fish could chew them into pieces at any moment. Holy Sun Mi Yen hastily said, "Hurry and gather around. Follow behind us. When we fall into the water later, try your best to find wooden planks for cover." Kacha kacha. Some of the sword-toothed fish jumped up and jumped onto the deck of the boat. Everyone was about to kill them. Arbor suddenly said, "Wait." Akir had long found her an eyesore. Upon hearing this, she sternly shouted, "Wait, what? Don't you see that these sword-toothed fish are about to chew up our treasures? What are you waiting for? Kill him." Akir stepped forward with her sword and cut the sword-toothed fish in half without saying a word. At the same time, a stream of venom spurted out from the belly of the sword-tooth-long fish, flying straight towards her face. At the same time that Akir cried out in alarm, she felt her body being pulled back and involuntarily fell over. ACI quickly pulled her to the back, but a young girl from the Hong Fu Academy standing beside Akir was out of luck. A portion of the splattered venom landed on her face and hands. She screamed in pain and subconsciously covered her face with her hands as she screamed. As if her face was burned by fire, it quickly turned red, swollen, and rotted. A piece of flesh from her chin fell to the ground with a plop, causing Akir to widen her eyes in horror. This venom was so terrifying. Arbor quickly stepped forward, pulled out a silver needle, and pricked the girl a few times. Then he stuffed a pill into her mouth and said with a solemn expression, "Swallow it." The other students from the Hong Family Academy gasped in astonishment. Chapter 30-21. The girl reflexively swallowed the pill, and the rotting condition on her face improved slightly. It didn't continue to worsen. However, when everyone saw her face, they couldn't help but gasp. Her face was completely ruined. Not only was her originally delicate and pretty face extremely swollen, but there were also 2 holes in her chin and cheeks that exposed her ghastly white bones. Akir shrunk her neck in fright. She took a step back and hid behind Yas. However, several students from the Hong Academy couldn't resist reprimanding her angrily. "Why are you hiding behind him? If you hadn't recklessly swung your sword to chop the sword-toothed fish just now, how could this have happened? Brainless guy." Jinx. Akir was also extremely aggrieved. How could she have known that the sword-toothed fish was so disgusting that there was actually a bag of poison hidden in its stomach? How could it give someone such a thing before it died? Did they think she was willing? It wasn't like she did it on purpose. The disfigured girl covered her face with her hands and sobbed. Arbor was a bit vexed and couldn't resist shouting, "All of you, shut up." She threw a medicine bottle to the girl. "Apply it once in the morning and night. You'll recover after a month." Everyone looked at her in a daze. They saw that the little stoic still didn't have much of an expression, and her gaze was even colder as it swept over the sobbing girl. Her gaze was really cold. This was what everyone thought in their hearts. That girl dazedly clutched the medicine bottle in her hand and raised her head to glance at the little stoic. At first, she was frightened by the little stoic's cold gaze, and then she felt as if a warm current flowed into her heart. The girl inexplicably felt that although the stoic face in front of her was young, for some reason, it made people want to trust her unconditionally. Thank you." The girl pursed her lips, her voice as weak as a mosquito's bite. After this incident, Akir also quieted down. She shrunk her neck and hid behind Aci and Ali without saying anything else. The boatmen shivered as they lay on the ground and said to Holy Sun Mi Yen, "Sir Holy Sun, save us, save us." Not only were the sword-toothed fish's teeth formidable, but the venom in its stomach was even more frightening. They were just ordinary people. If they were bitten by the sword-toothed fish, they would definitely die. However, if the venom accidentally splashed onto them when they were slaughtering the saber-toothed long fish, then with their identities as ordinary people, they might not even be as good as the young girl and would die in a matter of minutes. Holy Sun Mi Yan's expression was also rather grave. He turned to look at the little stoic and asked gravely, "Do you have any methods?" Inexplicably, he felt that this little girl, who was full of treasures, should have a way to help everyone out of this predicament. The little fellow raised her eyebrows and glared at him. "Didn't you bring this disaster upon yourselves? Now that you can't control yourself, you want to ask me for help?" Holy Sun Mi Yen said, "Is there a misunderstanding? Now we're all in the same boat? Was he crazy to attract these things to harm everyone, including himself?" The little stoic rolled her eyes at him. "You don't know how to cause trouble, but don't tell me other people can't." Holy Sun Mi Yen reflexively glanced at the silent holy nun, Nye Yaoguang. For some reason, he had an intuition that the little stoic was targeting the holy nun. Chapter 30-22. Holy Nun Nye Yaoguang, on the other hand, was looking down without any expression on her face. When she saw the Holy Sun's gaze, she bowed and said respectfully, "Holy Sun, let us go down and slaughter the sword-toothed fish." The moment she said that, the few priests of the temple looked at her as if they had eaten a fly. What kind of joke was this? Since she knew that the sword-toothed fish had poison in their stomachs, she still wanted them to go down and die. There were not only hundreds and thousands of sword-toothed fish gathered below, there were probably close to 7 to 8 million of them. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands, not to mention so many sword-toothed fish. The few priests stared at holy nun Niaoguang as if they were looking at a lunatic. Is there something wrong with your brain? Even with so many people going down together, they might not be able to handle so many sword-toothed fish, much less 30 to 40 of them from the temple? The holy nun's expression was calm. With a flip of her hand, she took out an exquisite ball with multicolored light flowing around it. You all only need to assist me. Once I keep all these sword-toothed fish into this exquisite ball, there will naturally be no danger left. Whoa, the exquisite ball in the holy nun's hand is a storage spiritual artifact. Everyone's eyes lit up as they landed on her hand. That storage spiritual artifact looked like it was overflowing with light. From the outside, it looked very beautiful. On the other hand, Mo Lien merely glanced at her before curling his lips slightly and shifting his gaze away. The little fellow tugged at her husband's sleeve curiously. Lien, is her exquisite ball very powerful? The material is not bad, but the forging standard is a little bad. Mo Lien whispered in her ear. This exquisite ball is made from deep-sea cold iron, and there are more than 10 kinds of good materials in it. Previously, when we were forging weapons for Little Fatty and the rest, if we could have 3 or 4 of them, we could have forged their weapons into level 15 divine artifacts. What a pity! Arbor blinked. In that case, the material of this exquisite ball is good, but the forging is not satisfactory? Mo Lien nodded and murmured something into her ear. Afterwards, he winked at her with an expression of watching a good show. A faint smile appeared on the little fellow's stoic face, and he nodded his head with a grin. Seeing that Niaoguang was so confident, Holy Sun Mi Yen nodded and said, "Since that's the case, everyone in the divine palace will follow me down. Assist the saintess in keeping these sword-tooth fish into the exquisite orb." Saintess Niaoguang was a little excited, even though she didn't show it on her face. She thought to herself that if she could subdue these sword-toothed fish that had sharp teeth and could spit poison, she would naturally be able to kill a lot of enemies in the water in a matter of minutes. She subconsciously glanced at Arbor, then turned around and led the Holy Sun and the others to the bottom of the cabin. Duan Yu glanced at Mo Lien and thought, the saintess, this fool, is probably going to run out of luck. At this time, Madame Goen had already shakily crawled over with one leg. That robust man, Huang Yang, hurried to her side and quickly reached out to support her. He whispered, "Madam, I was held back by someone just now." Madame Goen quickly waved her hand at him, indicating for him to stop talking. She warily glanced at Mo Lien and Arbor, who were standing at the side of the ship, and shuddered all over. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., don't wait for me." Chapter 30-23. Right now, she was truly a bit fearful of this stoic face. She secretly made up her mind to avoid provoking this little stoic if she could in the future. After suffering so many losses at her hands, Goengua had learned her lesson. She was the dignified madam of Goengua. If she could avoid provoking this couple, she would naturally be able to live a good life with a handsome man. However, she had a bit of a screw loose previously and just had to target this stoic face. The stoic face wasn't an easy bone to chew. Just based on her cold and stern appearance just now, even the emperor couldn't be provoked. If she hadn't wailed loudly in the end and knelt on the ground to beg for mercy, perhaps she really would have been killed by this stoic face. Madame of Goengua believed that in the end, the little stoic didn't stop killing her because she was soft-hearted. Why didn't she kill her? Because a coward like Madame of Goengua wasn't worth it for her to make a move. For some reason, Madame of Goengua had such a clear thought in her mind. She shuddered and supported the robust man, Huang Yang, by the arm. She whispered to him, "How is Mr. Zhao?" Huang Yang weakly shook his head at her. The shock in his heart hadn't passed yet. Prince Mo really didn't give Madame of Goengua any face and killed Mr. Zhao with a single blow. The Crown Prince was warning Madame of Goengua that if she continued, her outcome wouldn't be any better than Mr. Zhao's. Mr. Zhao truly had 8 lifetimes worth of bad luck. Just because he wanted to protect Madame of Goengua, the couple viewed him as a thorn in their flesh. Although Huang Yang felt that the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless in their methods, he had nothing to say in response. After all, the two sides had different standpoints, so their opponents were naturally different as well. If Madame seized this rare opportunity, it was hard to guarantee that she wouldn't be so ruthless towards the Crown Princess. Although the Crown Prince and Crown Princess were ruthless, they merely struck first to gain the upper hand. Winner takes all. Wasn't Madame admitting defeat now out of fear of being beaten? Huang Yang sighed and helped the limping Madame of Goengua to sit down on the side. He warned, "Madame, I'll help you bandage your wound first. When it enters the water later, this blood might attract ferocious beasts in the water." Madame Goen nodded listlessly and didn't say anything. She just let the gazelle do whatever it wanted. The little stoic reached out to stroke the strands of hair that floated in front of her forehead and absent-mindedly turned her head to glance at the Madam of the Ministry of State Security. Like a startled little beast, Goen sat up straight and shrunk back to the railing. Arbor looked at her coldly and then retracted his gaze. Madame Goen only felt a bone-chilling coldness. She touched her forehead and found that it was full of cold sweat. She was so frightened by this glance that she almost peed. Everyone on the ship was anxious and restless. A few students from the academy could not help but lower their heads to look into the water. From their point of view, they could only see the 5-colored light of the exquisite ball faintly flickering. It seemed that the Saintess was currently absorbing the saber-toothed fish. It would be much better if I could take away all the sword-fang fish. Even if they entered the water, they would not have to face the siege of thousands of sword-fang fishes. The little stoic reached out to hold the railing and looked down. She then blinked and shrunk into her husband's arms. "They're here." Boom. A huge tremor stole up from the bottom of the ship. Everyone, who was brimming with anticipation, was instantly stupefied by this sound. They only felt the ship violently shake and tremble. The ship, which was riddled with holes, disintegrated in an instant. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.